Okay, so good evening to all of you. So as you can see, that today we are going to discuss about basically the paper 1 of History Optional 2025. Thank you, Neha. Okay, fine. So when it comes to the paper of 2025, there are a few things I would like to discuss in the beginning, and that I'll come to that question by question discussion. Fine. So when it comes to 2025 one paper one precisely, or in fact for that matter paper two also, there were bit surprises in this paper, right? So basically we were not ready for these kind of things, but yet they have been done in this paper. And what are they? I think first surprise is the map section, right? Because for continuously they had been asking the map, they had been giving the map along with the state boundaries, right? And this year I don't find that the state boundaries were used. Rather I can see that it was given without the state boundaries. And in fact, if you have been preparing it with the state boundaries, and then of course it was a bouncer for you people, and I would accept genuinely that even I had been suggesting this to the students, now prepare with the state boundaries, there is no need to draw any lines and all. बट यूपीएससी कीप्स ऑन प्लेइंग विद दीज काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स, ठीक है, वो आती रहती है बाउंसर्स के साथ, और कभी कभी जो है ऐसे फंसाने की कोशिश आपको करते हैं, ठीक है। तो ये एक थोड़ा सा जो है मैं कहूँगा सेटबैक था। तो दूसरी चीज, देयर आर सो मेनी टॉपिक्स दे हैव बीन रिपीटेड, राइट, दैट वाज आल्सो अ सॉर्ट ऑफ सरप्राइज, such as the way they asked this question of Pallava Chalukya, the way they asked this question of Harappan art, right? These were more or less the repetition of the same theme, and that was really quite surprising that how come they can ask the same theme that what they have already used last year. I don't find it very practical. But then practically speaking, when you see that the repetition of the question, it is indicating towards that process through which they make the questions, right? बहुत important है समझना कि क्या process वो follow करते हैं, and in fact if you understand that process, so that can guide you for the next year. That's also sort of very important thing. I cannot say everything very openly that what process is being followed for the paper making, but then of course it is a sort of hint to you guys, and in fact we also anticipate a couple of things out of this, right? Okay, so these are a couple of things that we have noted in the paper. And just a second. Yeah, so coming back to the point. So when it comes to I was just discussing about the process of this paper making, right? So I just told you it is a sort of hint that what is the process being followed by them for paper making. That's also one thing. Normally I take some time to come up with the discussion. Now there's a hurry that could be noticed among us, among the teachers, that I'm the first one to have the discussion. It is quite okay to have the discussion as early as possible, because after writing the paper, students are always anticipating. They're always wondering whether they have written it correctly or not. But when it comes to humanities paper, I believe that if you have studied it properly, in that case, maybe a little variation, right? But it is not happening that you have been writing correct, completely the wrong answer. It may happen that you have diverted somewhere. But it is very important to go for a proper analysis of the paper, and this is the reason I usually take some time to go for the discussion. Because when it comes to paper, I never try to understand it only with respect to question. Maybe as a student, it is good for you that you see it just a question or just a collection of the questions, right? But for me, it is not merely the collection of the questions. I always want to understand why was this question asked, right? And if this question has been asked, is there any logic, is there any rationale behind it because of what they have been asking this question? So my process is bit different, right? तो मैं थोड़ा समझने की कोशिश करता हूँ कि क्वेश्चन क्यों पूछा उन लोगों ने, अच्छा ये क्वेश्चन रिपीट किया तो क्यों किया रिपीट किया उन लोगों ने क्वेश्चन. सो मेरी थोड़ा सा माय अप्रोच इज बिट डिफरेंट. मैं थोड़ा देखना चाहता हूँ कि अगर एग्जैक्टली जो है वो स्टेटमेंट है वो किस किताब से लेने की कोशिश की है. इज इट रियली वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट इफ दे हैव बीन पिकिंग अप द स्टेटमेंट्स, राइट, in that case it becomes very important as a teacher to understand that which book has been referred by them for taking this statement or for asking this particular statement, because that also even guides us, right? अगर मुझे ये समझ में आता है कि let's say A.L. Bossum still remains quite relevant, it means कि while teaching I need to keep A.L. Bossum in contact. I have to take certain aspects from A.L. Bossum and I have to give it to the students. That's what I'll say, that's very important for us, and that's why I just want to understand okay, what are the reference material for them while making these kind of questions, right? This is like, there's one more thing I must say. The questions were more or less in the expected line, right? So I can't say, or nobody can say that the questions were very different. Such like, it happens very frequently in the pre-examination. When you write the pre, and sometimes you say that, like, इस बार तो question एकदम अलग तरीके से पूछ लिया उन लोगों ने. Now, normally optional में भी कई बार ups and downs होते हैं, but frankly speaking, अगर आप इस बार का पेपर देखेंगे, तो expected lines है. Expected line क्या है? जो pre के questions, sorry, जो paper 1 part A के questions होते हैं, they are mostly what? Analytical questions, right? When it comes to part B, which is medieval India, you can find that the questions are basically more they're more factual kind of questions which are being asked. But paper 1 part A, I found in a very traditional line, the same conceptual questions are being asked by them, and until and unless you have a very good understanding of the paper, like paper or let's say ancient India, you won't be able to answer these kind of questions. On the other hand, when it comes to medieval India, there I find like now they have tried to become more rational as compared to the last year. Whereas last year I noticed that they have like ignored Sultanate and Mughal altogether, and they have asked mainly the questions from the periphery. This year at least they have included some good number of questions from the Sultanate and Mughal also. That was like really good, because your medieval India section is comprised of mainly which parts, like Sultanate and Mughal. So you can't ignore it in this way. Maybe in the school text, maybe in the university curriculum, there is a different kind of treatment being given to it. But when it comes to UPSC, since it yet remains as part of your syllabus, that's the reason because of what you have to cover it. And since they have included like a good number of questions this year, that is a good sign. So I appreciate that they have retained the number of questions from this part, right? So these are certain things that I would like to discuss. I wanted to discuss, and then now let's come to the paper. Fine. So when it comes to paper, let me tell you a few things very categorically, that I'm not going to explain everything, every facts and everything. I just wanted to get you sort of direction in which you are supposed to write the answer of these questions. And after doing this, we will try to understand some historiography also, the direction, the approach, all these kind of things will definitely I'll try to get you. But as far as the exact answer or the proper facts are concerned, right? So very soon, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow, you'll get it in my Telegram channel. So a proper answer along with the historiography, along with the facts which were needed in that particular answer, I will find in the Telegram group. So you can join the Telegram group in order to get it, right? So, okay, these are the things I was supposed to discuss. So let us have the discussion one by one on the questions, right? So first, I'll be coming to the map question. Okay, I have already told you that map was a surprise this time. Okay, धोखा किया यूपीएससी वालों ने आप लोगों के साथ. ठीक है, और इतिहास याद रखेगा इसको. ठीक है, ये गलत चीज है. मुझे याद है कि शुरुआत में उन्होंने एक बार बिना स्टेट बाउंड्री के साथ पूछा. नेक्स्ट ईयर उन लोगों ने क्या किया, फिर से स्टेट बाउंड्रीज हटा दिए. तो मैंने उस समय जो मेरा मैप मटेरियल है, उस मैप मटेरियल में मैंने दोनों पेजेस रखे थे. मतलब विद द स्टेट, आई पॉइंटेड ऑल द साइड्स विद द स्टेट बाउंड्रीज, विदाउट द स्टेट बाउंड्रीज. फिर उन लोगों ने कंटिन्यूटी में क्या किया, स्टेट बाउंड्रीज के साथ पूछा. तो मुझे लगा अब शायद वो नहीं पूछेंगे. ठीक है, 3-4 साल उन्होंने वो पैटर्न फॉलो किया. मैंने वो पेज हटा लिया अपने जो है मटेरियल से, एंड आई जस्ट केप्ट इट वेरी सिंपल, वेरी प्लेन, राइट, एंड मतलब विद द स्टेट बाउंड्रीज. एंड इस बार उन लोगों ने फिर से धोखा कर दिया. ठीक है, तो मैं यही कहूंगा कि बच्चों के साथ ठीक नहीं किया आपने, ऐसे खेला मत करिए. बच्चों का भविष्य होता है भाई, बहुत मेहनत करते हैं वो लोग मीन्स लिखने के लिए, एंड देन व्हेन दे आर राइटिंग द मीन्स ऐसे बाउंसर्स मत दिया करिए. और मैप इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट lucrative part of your history paper, because if you have performed well in the map section, you are going to get somewhere between 35 to 40 also. and खराब चला गया तो जाहिर सी बात है कि उसमें काफी एक सेटबैक आपको मिलता है. ठीक है, तो मैप सेक्शन के साथ जो है इमोशंस जुड़े होते हैं, तो मत खेलिए बच्चों के इमोशन के साथ. दिस इज लाइक genuine appeal to UPSC, right? Okay, coming to this point. This time, I'll say the map was simpler. ठीक है, इफ अगर हम इस बाउंसर को हटा देते हैं और फिर हम बात करते हैं, तो मैप क्वेश्चन जो है थोड़ा ज्यादा सिंपल था एज कंपेयर टू द लास्ट 2 years, राइट? क्योंकि पिछले 2 सालों में मैंने देखा कि लोग स्ट्रगल कर रहे थे. अगर उनको 12-13 साइड्स भी सही करने हैं तो लोग स्ट्रगल कर रहे थे. इस बार मुझे समझ में आया मैप का क्वेश्चन देख के कि आप जो है बहुत मजे से 15-16 साइड्स सही कर सकते थे. एंड फ्रैंकली स्पीकिंग, एक्सपेक्टेशन इसके बियॉन्ड होनी भी नहीं चाहिए, बिकॉज दे हैव एवरी ईयर दे हैव स्टार्टेड इंक्लूडिंग सर्टेन न्यू sites, and whenever the new sites are coming, now it all depends that whether you have prepared all these kind of sites or not. So that's the reason, because of what, if you have been doing 15 or 16 sites, and if you have been giving the correct description of these sites, that's sufficient, right? So if you'll see these sites, so I have just prepared an analysis of this. So the first site, the Neolithic sites in Ladakh region, and in fact it is either Tangste and there was another site that's called as Rupsu Plains. Now these are Neolithic sites. You could have written Ladakh also, ठीक है, एक दो और sites है जो आप वो भी जो है लिख सकते हैं, and here I have written it this site has been asked for the first time, right? Then the second is the Mesolithic site, that is Chandravati. Okay, again this is this has been asked for the first time. The third is the Paleolithic site, which is Ranganathpur. It has been also asked for the first time. And whatever the sites I have provided you, I am not relying on this fact. Maybe certain sites which are which are close in nature, right, or which are similar in nature, so I haven't taken it. So I have given you the exact site. Exact site से मतलब है मैंने GPS का इस्तेमाल करके कोशिश की है कि मैं आपको सही साइट दे सकूं, बट मुझे बहुत सीवियर डाउट है कि यूपीएससी भी बहुत एग्जैक्ट या बहुत प्रिसाइज है साइट्स के लोकेशन में, आई डोंट बिलीव. तो अगर आप आसपास के साइट्स भी मार्क करते हैं तो देयर इज नो प्रॉब्लम, दैट मे वर्क, राइट. द फोर्थ इज द Neolithic site with the stone artifacts. That's Koldiva. That's it is a very repeated sort of site. 18, 19, 20. इसमें पूछा है इन लोगों ने. Site of the Indus Valley civilization is Rojdi. Again, the previous site. It has been asked previously. Early Harappan site with a fire pit is Banavali, asked previously. Late Harappan site is Hulas or Alamgirpur. Though it is asked for the first time, but I believe that it is again it can be done by any student, right? The Ostrich colored pottery, an OCP site. That's Hastinapur, though it has been asked for the first time, but then quite doable site. Mesolithic site, this Tenmalai, Tenmala or Tenmalai, this has been also asked for the first time, but it is a popular site, you should have done it. The Megalithic site is the Jaunapani or Khapa. These are couple of sites, or Naikund. Again, this has been asked previously, so that's why I'll keep it in the category of the doable sites. Okay, Mahajanpada of South India, it's very simple site, right? First time asked site in last 10 years, right? But yet I can say it was a very much doable site, right? Then the site of Buddha's Mahaparinirvana, very simple site. Major rock edicts of Asoka, that Yeragudi, though it has been again asked for the first time, but then quite doable site. Asokan minor rock edicts, that's Sasaram or Arara, okay? Though it has been also asked for the first time, but मुझे लगता है doable था. The commercial center of the Mauryans, Tamripti, very simple sites asked previously. Then the Saka Kusana coin hoard, that is Ujjain. इन लोगों ने 10 साल में पिछले 10 साल में पहली बार पूछा है, but उज्जैन जो है doable sites. 17 an inscription of mentioning Aswamedha script. That's the Ayodhya inscription of Dhanadev, ठीक है. That has been asked for the first time, but मुझे भी लगता है कि ये किया जा सकता था, इतना मुश्किल नहीं था. Site of the post-Mauryan, burnt brick house, that is Roopnagar. That has been asked for the first time. Terracotta craft center of the post-Mauryan period, that's Chandraketugarh, asked so many years previously. Important port of the Pallava period, that's Kanchipuram. Again, doable question. So I think after seeing this, easily anybody can say most of the sites were doable. तो 15-16 sites तो बहुत मजे से हो सकते थे, इसमें कोई second thought नहीं है, right? So that's all about the map area. Let's come to the questions now. Look at the first question, from ancient India. So the question is, the Chalcolithic people were expert in microliths and were also skillful worker in stone. Elucidate. 15 marks. Now this question was literally a very tricky question. Again and again, I'll keep on saying you one thing, that Chalcolithic is gradually becoming important. Reason is very simple. Simple reason is this, okay, earlier there was very lesser work on Chalcolithic, but recently, in the recent 2 decades I must say, and in fact I'll become more precise in last 10 years, there are several books got published on Indian Chalcolithic cultures, and since Deccan College of Pune is based over there, that's why all the archaeologists or majority of the archaeologists, either you say about B.N. Mishra, B.B. Lal, S.R. Rao, D.P. Agrawal, ये सारे लोग जो है बहुत एक्टिव हैं उन साइट्स को एक्सकेवेट करने में, री-एक्सकेवेट करने में, and now it is being viewed in a very different way. That's a Chalcolithic has undoubtedly become important, for us in last few years, I must say. So if the question is coming, it's not very surprising. ठीक है? In fact, this year, I had been taking one session, the main से पहले जो है, optional से पहले जो gap होता है उसमें, I had been taking sessions for all these people, those who had been writing mains this year. So I took 4 sessions on ancient, medieval, modern and world. मैंने categorically बोला था ये वाला topic prepare कर लो, ये आएगा इस बार. ठीक है? मुझे बहुत वो कहते हैं ना सिक्स सेंस जो है ऐसा बता रहा था कि ये वाला क्वेश्चन आएगा और ये क्वेश्चन आया। तो इसमें ऐसा नहीं है, ये कुछ पैटर्न्स को देख के ही पता चला था, ऐसा नहीं कि मुझे किसी ने बताया था। बट देन द क्वेश्चन दैट हैज बीन आस्क्ड, इट इज ए सॉर्ट ऑफ रेयर एरिया, ठीक है। Normally when it comes to Chalcolithic culture, so Chalcolithic culture has become, as I told you, that it is one of the lively topics among the archaeologists. They have been studying it, and you should know of like three different kind of Chalcolithic culture. One is the Harappan Chalcolithic, the second is the non-Harappan Chalcolithic, and the third is the OCP, Ostray colored pottery, or basically the copper hoard culture, right? So these are three different cultures, Chalcolithic cultures. So if it is right, simply it is writing Chalcolithic people, so like normally we avoid the Harappan Chalcolithic, because this is not the name that we use for the Harappan Chalcolithic. Rather we use it either early Harappans or the late Harappans, तो हम उसको avoid कर देते हैं. Then it comes to the second one, that is the copper hoard culture, that could be mostly noticed in UP and UP and West Bengal. So when it comes to this copper hoard culture, very less studies have been done on the copper hoard culture, and that's why we have lesser information on that. That's why you could have avoided this also. It means कि ले देके हमारे पास जो है Western Chalcolithic culture है, वही बचता है जिसके बारे में हमें लिखना है. So you know that couple of important cultures such as Ahar or Banas culture, then Malwa culture, then Jorve culture, right? These are couple of cultures which are there in this particular site. But then look at this question, like how exactly they have asked this question, and in fact, until and unless you understand it carefully, frankly speaking, you won't be able to answer it properly, right? So it is saying that the Chalcolithic people were expert in microliths, right? And then skillful workers in the stone. I think this is having no different meaning, rather it is having the same meaning, because if any culture is having the expertise in making the making the microliths, it means ki they were having that skill to make the stone objects, right? But then how to write this answer? Let me first tell you that microliths matlab certain small tools what they had been preparing with the help of stones, such as you can talk about, let's say, arrowhead and then spear and all these kind of things. So these are microliths. Now you all understand that microlith is the specification of which period? Is Mesolithic, right? Is Mesolithic. It means that Mesolithic culture somehow continued even in the Chalcolithic period, fine? And in fact, they carried this expertise. So undoubtedly, this question does require good number of facts as well, right, to write this answer, because until and unless you write it properly, right, you won't be able to fetch very good marks. But then let me tell you the core idea of this. Look, ultimately, it is a Chalcolithic culture. So Chalcolithic precisely means copper plus stone, or let's say lithic. This is the meaning of it, right? Now the point is that though they have started using metallurgy, right, or they have started using copper as a metal, but then you have to write about the limitation of the copper, that the copper could not be used for what? For making tools. That's the limitation. So if the copper could not be used for making the tools, right, in that case, they were still dependent on what? They were dependent on stones, basically for creating anything which is hard in nature. So that is one limitation that you should discuss in the, maybe you can write it in the introduction itself, right? Or else you can write it in the second paragraph, that there are certain reasons because of what, they continued with the stone, tools, right? The second thing, if you'll see this particular part, right, where exactly the part of the Chalcolithic what we have been discussing. So do you find any Neolithic culture over here? In Gujarat and Maharashtra, are the Neolithic cultures present? Neolithic mostly you discuss in which parts of India, right? So normally that central part of India, Allahabad, Pratapgarh, then Bihar, then Bengal, right? Then Narmada Valley, these are the parts. So on the other hand, if we talk about Gujarat and Maharashtra, several Mesolithic sites are present in this way. So you just understand in this way ki Mesolithic, right, which is not following the Neolithic, which is not there, right, and then it is coming to Chalcolithic. I hope now you got the continuity. The reason because of what they have continued with the microliths, this is the idea because of what they have continued with the microliths. So it was their compulsion, because that next stage is not coming precisely in this particular part, and that's how they have just carried forward the same culture which was being used by the Mesolithic people. Fine. Now this is the second thing. Okay, coming to the third part. Now these are the core ideas I have been discussing. Sorry, this is the first core idea. This is the second core idea. The third core idea of this question. Now this was about basically the materialistic or material development of the Chalcolithic cultures. Though they have certain limitations, it does not mean that they were materialistically not very sound. You know that the Chalcolithic cultures had that skill or that had that potential to convert into an urbanized civilization, right? And in fact, it was gradually heading towards that. ये धीरे 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 उसकी तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं. तो जब मैं ये कहता हूँ या कोई क्वेश्चन ये पूछता है या फिर आप Chalcolithic जब आप पढ़ते हैं तो जब आप इसको इस तरीके से पढ़ते हैं कि their materialistic culture was gradually becoming so rich that and the way they have started producing the surplus as well in their agriculture, it had the potential to convert into an urbanized civilization. It means that the materialistic cultures was somehow developing. I have told you categorically that once it is coming to urbanization or it is coming to a sort of materialistic development of any civilization, it means that you need any stone, any metal, because that is depending on that. Unfortunately, these people never had that. So what I'm trying to tell you, the third important point, that they materialistically these people or their material development was going in a good direction. Their agriculture was functioning functioning properly. I have already told you that from the circular huts now they are moving to the rectangular and the rectangular and the square shaped huts. That means it was an indicator of civilization. In fact, over the period we do find certain granaries also in this culture. The site of the settlement was becoming bigger. You remember the sites of Daimabad and then Daimabad and Inamgaon. These are the biggest sites. So basically they had been improving. They were somehow achieving great amount of materialistic development. So unfortunately the copper was not the supporting factor, and that's why they had to rely heavily on what? They had to rely heavily on stone, this basically. So these are certain reasons because of what they had to naturally achieve that skill, right, in the microliths, because I told you the reason because of what it continued and then the reason because of what it is happening. Now here after giving all this analysis, you can write basically what are the skills or what are the achievements in this particular direction. So you can write about the various things they had been using, such as chert, jasper, agate. These are the stones what they had been using for making it. And in fact they have been making different kind of tools, such as arrowheads were there, some cutting and the scrapping tools they have been using. And one more thing, sorry I missed to tell you, why microliths, for that also you need to understand one point. When you are saying you are materialistically improving, it means that gradually certain craft activities must be developing among them. So जब उनके अंदर craft activities develop करिए तो क्या आपको लगता है कि जो है core tools would be quite helpful? आपके अंदर लेदर टेक्नोलॉजी है, मान लीजिए लेदर क्राफ्ट जो है डेवलप कर रहा है, या आपके अंदर और भी बहुत सारी चीजें हैं जो है वो डेवलप कर रहे हैं. इनको बनाने के लिए आपको क्या चाहिए? माइक्रोलिथ चाहिए. ठीक है, दैट वाज आल्सो वन रीजन, बिकॉज देयर इकोनॉमी हैज इंप्रूव्ड अ लॉट, राइट? दैट इज हाउ दे नीडेड सम माइक्रोलिथ्स दैट they could go for these kind of craft activities. That is the also one specification of this. Fine. So that's how I can say that their materialistic culture culture was somehow somehow bringing a sort of requirement for this. That's why they had been gradually achieving that skill or that expertise in this, right? There was one scholar, that scholar is D.P. Agrawal. Now this person, D.P. Agrawal, has studied basically D.P. Agrawal has studied the the microware or the tools basically, and it is known as the microware analysis. And under this particular analysis, we can find that this person had studied precisely about their microliths, right? And in fact, recently also there was one scholar, that scholar is Amrita Sarkar, who has studied. She herself teaches in the Deccan College of Pune, and 2014-15, I guess, there was a book published by her. In that book, she had precisely talked about basically their tool technology, and so she has talked about the pyro technologies, right? And the second is non-pyro processes. Pyro technology means the way they had been making the ceramics or let's say some other metal objects. On the other hand, non-pyro processes are basically dealing with what? They are dealing with basically their stone technology, and there she has precisely written about what are the specific tool technologies they had. And you understand in the Mesolithic or the Neolithic, if you have studied, there are the direct percussion, indirect percussion, right? And then the pressure technique, right? So basically this was the result of the pressure technique, because of what? This is what she has been talking about, the non-pyro processes, right? So this is how you could have you could have conveyed, okay, these were the requirements. So if you believe that only by putting the facts or writing the facts you could have conveyed a very good answer, that is impossible. All these analysis should be there, and after the analysis basis you should have given a brief write up in a paragraph basically, that what is the technology being used by them, what are the various objects or the raw material being used by them, what are the various stuff they had been preparing out of these stones. These are certain facts which were needed. That's how you're supposed to write this answer. Fine. And in fact, after that, when you had been concluding it, you might have written about that transition. From here, it directly enters into Iron Age, and that's how this technology goes down. And there, now they became heavily dependent on iron. So this is a transition from a proto-history to the proper historical age. That transition, with that transition, you could have finished this answer. Fine, that is it. Fine. That's all about this answer. I hope there was no doubt in this question. Okay, coming to the next one. ये भी question धोखा है, कुछ नहीं. The Harappans were not an artistic people. ठीक है. Look at the word which is there towards the end. What is it? Tail word जिसको आप लोग कहते हैं. This is comment. It means कि you cannot take it simply, or you cannot prove what exactly has been asked. अगर वो पूछ रहे comment करने के लिए, मतलब आपको जो है intellectual type जो है comment करना पड़ेगा इसमें. ये question last year भी दूसरे twist करके पूछा था. Last year भी when I took the discussion, I told you categorically it is a debate among scholars. The first point, and you should see it. ये तो जैसे आप लोग pre लिखते हैं वैसा वो वाला logic rational चाहिए था. ठीक है. The Harappans were not an artistic people. ठीक है. ये कौन decide करेगा? ये कौन डिसाइड करेगा? ठीक है. ये मैं तो नहीं डिसाइड करूंगा. आर यू गोइंग टू डिसाइड? नो. तो हम कैसे कमेंट कर सकते हैं कि वो लोग आर्टिस्टिक पीपल है या नहीं है? बहुत सिंपल सा लॉजिक है. ठीक है. हम नहीं कमेंट कर सकते इस पे. सो बेसिकली यू नीड टू टेक द बैकअप ऑफ द स्कॉलर्स टू प्रूव कि वेदर दे वर आर्टिस्टिक पीपल और नॉट. This statement has been, as it is, taken by A.L. Bosom's book, The Wonder That Was India, where he writes, right, that the Harappans were not on the whole an artistic people. The sentence has been asked. ठीक है. Directly उनकी किताब से उठा के पूछा गया है. So ये debate बहुत पुरानी है. And frankly speaking, I will go to the the early part of this debate. In that case, I must say that there were two scholars before 1950s who had been discussing about the Harappan art, is John Marshall and Mortimer Wheeler. ठीक है. मॉर्टिमर वेलर जो है वो बोलते हैं कि नहीं यार ये आर्ट सेंस नहीं है, इसमें एस्थेटिक सेंस बिल्कुल नहीं है. इनफैक्ट ही हैज सेड कि दे आर मोर फंक्शनल सॉर्ट ऑफ थिंग रादर देन एस्थेटिक, राइट. एंड इनफैक्ट लास्ट ईयर जो स्टेटमेंट उठा के पूछा था वो मॉर्टिमर वेलर से पूछा था. ठीक है. तो वो लोग एस्थेटिक सेंस है या नहीं, तो उन्होंने रिजेक्ट किया कि नहीं, देयर इज नो एस्थेटिक सेंस अमंग द हरप्पन्स, दे आर मोर फंक्शनल, दे आर मोर यूटिलिटेरियन काइंड ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट. दिस इज व्हाट ही हैज सीन. On the other hand, John Marshall, at that point of time, even much before Mortimer Wheeler, John Marshall said कि no, actually the Harappans were having the refined aesthetic culture. That is how he is. John Marshall बेचारा अच्छे आदमी थे. ठीक है. वो हमेशा हरप्पन्स की तारीफ करते थे, बोलते नहीं अच्छे आदमी है. वो जो है माइग्रेशन थ्योरी को उस समय रिजेक्ट किया था, बोला नहीं यार इंडिजिनस कल्चर है. याद रखिएगा, जॉन मार्शल अच्छा आदमी है, वो जो है ठीक तरीके से लिखता है, लेकिन मॉर्टिमर विलर अच्छा आदमी नहीं है, वो हमेशा रिजेक्ट करता है इन किसको, राइट. तो इन दोनों ने लिखा. अगर हम थोड़े बाद के स्कॉलर्स की बात करेंगे तो देयर इज अनदर स्कॉलर, दैट स्कॉलर स्टुअर्ट पिगॉट, राइट. नाउ स्टुअर्ट पिगॉट हैज रिटन बेसिकली he has made the comparison with the Egyptian and Mesopotamian art forms, and in this comparison he found it that Harappans were not having the aesthetic sense, rather they were very plain, they were very simple, these kind of lines are there. In fact, if you read Upinder Singh, you'll find that he has used this particular line, that the Harappan art was considered to be very plain and simple. So there was a perception for this Harappan art form that used to be very simple and plain, and frankly speaking, this perception continued till 1990s, and only after that certain scholars have given the counter arguments, right. Now the point is that why is it considered to be very plain, simple, without any aesthetic sense? So you can understand that the Western scholars always wanted to prove the backwardness of Harappan civilization. But then you should also understand that at that point of time, right, when they had been trying to prove the backwardness, so I think it was less academic, more political, because of what they wanted to prove. So because at that point of time India was either colony or India had just become become a free country, and at that point of time nobody was ready to accept the Harappans could have also excelled इन मल्टीपल फॉर्म्स. बाकी चीजें देख के उनकी ऐसी ही जल भुन गई थी, तो उन्होंने कहा कि नहीं ये वाला तो पकड़ के बैठते कि नहीं एस्थेटिक सेंस उनके अंदर नहीं है, ऐसा वो लोग बोलते. ठीक है. But then, and in fact, why is it being shown? Because if we'll compare it with basically the Mesopotamian and the Egyptian art forms, in that case, you'll find that undoubtedly they had a different trend or different pattern of making it, and undoubtedly their art forms were somehow it seems to be more refined. But then you must know, okay, when it comes to the art, it is a sort of a very subjective thing, right? So you cannot get this objectivity. And in fact, the most important thing, you can give certain examples in order to support your argument, because what are the examples of the Harappan art form? That's also very important. So in the examples, we can precisely talk about the terracotta figurines, and precisely speaking, this statement has been given on the basis of the terracotta figurines. That also I should tell you categorically, एस्थेटिकली सुंदर नहीं है, ये टेराकोटा फिगरेंस के बेसिस पे ही दिए गए हैं, बिकॉज बाकी चीजें आप देखेंगे तो दे हैड एन एक्सपर्टाइज अनडाउटेडली. सो विल बी प्रिसाइजली फोकसिंग ऑन द टेराकोटा फिगरेंस एंड द वे दे वर मेड इन अ वेरी सिंपल वे. देयर वाज नो एक्सपर्टीज दैट इज बीइंग एक्सप्रेस्ड, राइट? So that's how we'll be writing, okay, they are simple and plain, and that is what being highlighted by some of the scholars. But then, as I told you, that scholars like Gregory Postel and most importantly Kenoyer, these are the recent scholars, they have rejected this idea, and they believe the Harappans had the static sense. You can even write about the Upinder Singh, though she is not an art historian, and that's how she is not precisely writing about it, right? She has just taken the views from some other sources. Now, on what ground they had been proving actually they had the aesthetic sense? So first of all, the most important thing that you should include in your answer, that is simply that if the kind of art they had been following or they were practicing, they continued it for roughly 1,000 years. Understand the point. When you start making it, maybe it is not very refined, but then over the period, by continuously making it, ultimately that specialization would naturally come in your art form, and then you can start making it refined. But you can find that there is no progress can be noticed. Why those no progress ever noticed in the Harappan art form? The reason is very simple, because they found that the beauty lies in this. So their sense or their understanding of the beauty was very different. In those objects it was there. Then you can prove it by giving some other examples, such as the beads, Harappan beads. They're one of the best examples of the Harappan art. Apart from that, you can talk about the bronze images, right? Maybe in the appearance it does not look beautifully, but then if it'll go for the technology, we'll go for the way they have been making it, the other parts of it. So undoubtedly we find the aesthetic sense. We find the stone images, that's also are very beautiful. So basically Harappans had their own perception of the beauty, and that is how they had been making it. Either it is about the images of Mother Goddess, or let's say Harappan architecture also. They had their own technology, and that's what they had been doing it. Fine. So this is how you have to prove no, actually you can't say they were not the artistic people. They had their own sense of, or they had their own aesthetic sense, and they kept on practicing this aesthetic sense for roughly 1,000 years. That shows that was their understanding of the art. That's very simple. So yes, it is a historiography based answer, and if you are not able to give this historiography, in that case the marks would be less, right? So come से 4-5 important scholars के नाम इसमें आने चाहिए, because it is a debate based question. That's what I'll say. ठीक है? Okay, fine. Next question, right? So next question is, the ideological challenges posed by Jainism and Buddhism was deeply rooted in the socio-economic transformation brought about the expansion of agricultural settlement in eastern India. ठीक है? Now this is again a sort of question. आप ये तो नहीं कह सकते exactly same question पूछा, but इस तरीके के बहुत questions उन लोगों ने पूछे. तो मुझे लगता है ज़्यादा mathematical formula type से question पूछ रहे हैं कि इसका connection उससे क्या है. So let us understand. So I'll come to this Jainism and Buddhism later on. First of all, just come to this socio-economic transformation brought about the agricultural expansion, right? So undoubtedly in the eastern India there is agricultural expansion, ये तो है, that you know, right? And that we prove with what? We prove with NBPW. Since you find majority of the NBPW sites in the eastern part of India, from the eastern UP to Bihar region, that shows the expansion of agriculture into this particular part. That is being proven by it. There was you can use one scholar, that scholar is Makhanlal, who had precisely studied this, right? Now it asks agricultural expansion brought about certain changes, and what sort of changes are there? One, it's saying, let's first write economic changes, and the second, they are talking about the social changes. This is what has been asked in the question, that it is asking about the economic and the social changes, right? So what kind of economic and the social changes were there? Okay. So you just remember one word, that the complexity increased along with the time. Now it became, the society and economy both became more complex. So you have to use this word categorically, that society and economy both had become complex, right? Now, how do you trace this complexity? So when it comes to economy, now it is not about the primary economic activity, rather along with the primary economic activity, the secondary economic activities are also coming up. So you need to precisely write, maybe you can write in certain points also, that okay, there as far as their primary economic activities are concerned, so agriculture somehow became very flourished, rice cultivation started, rice transplantation has also become a sort of common process during this period, and this is how you're going to discuss about some sort of advancement coming here. The tool is getting advanced, and in fact the way you find that the things are becoming things are becoming complex, or things are improving, that is further bringing the complexity also, such as all those economic changes are somehow having impact over the society as well, such as now it is here you find the term Gehapati, right? Now, Gehapati is about those people who had been mastering, or those who had been owning huge amount of land. So the moment you talk about the Gehapati, it means that you must talk about the agricultural labors also. So there are some agricultural labors, right? So agriculture itself is becoming slightly complex. It did not remain so easy also. Easy as in why? Why am I saying so? There's a simple reason. Now agriculture required certain tools such as plow. और आपको पता नहीं मालूम है या नहीं मालूम है, मैं बता दूं, इट वाज नॉट दैट इजी फॉर एवरीवन टू हैव द प्लाउ, ठीक है? वो एक कॉस्टली अफेयर होता था, तो हर किसी के घर में नहीं होता था, कुछ लोग ही होते थे जो रिच पेजेंट होते थे, वो प्लाउ रखते थे। और आप देखेंगे कि आप अगर बुद्धिस्ट टेक्स्ट पढ़ेंगे उस पीरियड का, या जातकास भी रेफर करेंगे, तो आपको मिलेगा कि कुछ ऐसे पेजेंट्स हैं जो रिच है, क्यों? उनके पास अपने हल है, अपनी बैले हैं, तो वो रिच पेजेंट है। इसका मतलब कि देयर वाज अ नोशन ऑफ क्लास इज कैटेगोरिकली कमिंग हियर, कि देयर आर सम रिच पीपल रिप्रेजेंट Gehapatis, they are they are having their own plows, they are having their own bullocks, right? So that's how they are falling in the rich category. On the other hand, some people are deprived from it, so that's how agriculture itself is becoming a bit complex. Then it comes to the secondary economic activities. And the secondary economic activities, what exactly you can talk about in the secondary economic activities? Manufacturing, trade and commerce, right? And in fact, some rich manufacturers, some rich traders, and the way you find that the guilds and all these kind of organizations are coming, so somehow they are making the things more complex. So this is how we'll say that because of this agricultural expansion, right, ultimately that surplus is being created. Sorry, I just missed to discuss this word. So surplus being created, and you understand that what scholars must be talking about it. R.S. Sharma is the champion of this early medieval, this period. So undoubtedly you need to write about R.S. Sharma. Yes, agricultural surplus, and the agricultural surplus is making the economy complex, and it even makes the society also complex. So how come the society is becoming complex? So there are a couple of things which are directly dependent on economy. There are a couple of things which are directly dependent on economy. But at the same time, I must say that it is becoming complex with respect to other things, such as what? It was making the Varna system more complex. It brought the Jati system as well, right? It brought the, class configuration. It created thus gender difference, right, in the society. So with respect to society, what you need to talk about? You need to talk about all these social complexities coming into the society. So because of this agricultural surplus or the agricultural transformation, ultimately you find all these changes were coming. Fine. Now what you are supposed to do? You have to link it with what? The ideological challenges. Ideological challenges. Fine. So this question you can start from both the aspects. Either you start it from Buddhism and Jainism, or else you start with the Mahajanpada period, right? Or let's say this particular period, and you can start, okay, this NBPW phase or this particular culture is having all these changes, right? And you can start with this complexity that early medieval, the Mahajanpada period is known for multiple transitions in the society or transformations in the society that includes all this, and that's how ultimately it is happening. So by introduction, either you can start from there. I would have started it from here, and then I would have come to the ideological challenges, right? Now what you are supposed to do, there are certain challenge, there were certain complexities arose in the society, and now how come Buddhism and Jainism had been trying to address it? Is as simple as that. ठीक है, आपको क्या करना है? You have to make it very simple here. Like the classes, economy was improving a lot, right? But unfortunately, the people, those who had been mainly handling it, now they were not enjoying the social status, and that's how what they did. They posed a challenge to the Varna hierarchy, right? Or they posed a challenge to the caste system in the society. So they were not accepting it. They were looking for the social status, and in fact this kind of prosperity, they had been enjoying it for the first time, and that's how they had some social aspirations. Now Buddhism posed a challenge to it. Again, this can be addressed here. So you can write about some other things. Now the person who had been enjoying the economic prosperity, by hook or by crook, they'll try to maintain it, such as, right, they would try to maintain it. Unfortunately, several Brahmanical principles had been hurting them, or they had been trying to destroy them, and that's how the non-violence principle, the way indirectly they supported money lending. So there are a couple of examples. By putting these examples, you can say how come Buddhism had been trying to basically challenge the previous things and support these ideas. Then it comes to the society. Now you understand what are the challenges posed by them. They have questioned everything, either it is about varna, jati, class, or gender, and in fact to a certain extent they had been supporting this idea of that egalitarian society. That's how they had been supporting it. So this is the core of this particular answer. So as I told you, that this kind of connections you can make. So either there might be many ways of writing this. Either you start with a general introduction of Mahajanpada period along with several transitions, right? And then it'll be coming to this is also one change, this is also one change, this is also one change, and these are the transformations, and then you can make the linkages one by one. So you have to write it in multiple paragraphs, right? And where you can go for an analysis. R.S. Sarma or D.D. Kosambi remain the most important scholars. इसके अलावा कुछ निकला नहीं है. ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा हो सके तो आप रोमिला था पर रणवीर चक्रवर्ती मेंशन कर सकते हैं, बट उसकी भी बहुत जरूरत मुझे फील नहीं होती. आप उसके बिना भी काम चला सकते थे. ठीक है? Okay. Let's move to the next question. The origin of the territorial republics has been traced to the reaction against the pattern of life that evolved in the later Vedic period. Very innovative questions taken precisely from the right-wing historians, right? Right-wing historians से इन लोगों ने ये वाला आंसर लिया है. Specifically, I'll say KP Jaiswal. He has precisely written about this. और पता नहीं कितने लोगों को ये समझ में आया कि it is again a debate that you need to write. Look at it. The origin of the territorial republics has been traced to the reaction against the pattern of the life that evolved in the later Vedic period. And then the question, the key word is analyze, or the tail word is analyze, right? It means कि you have to write कि how come the changing pattern of the life in the later Vedic period had created a sort of opposition against this. And that is how ultimately you see the formation of the Mahajanpadas. That's one. And then you need to give the counter arguments as well. It is as simple as that, right? So okay, first of all, you have to write about this, how to start with. You need to write about basically some those republics which were there, a brief introduction of those republics. Now if we'll go for the writing of KP Jaiswal, in that case, let us understand what is the what is the main idea or the central idea. So his idea is related to basically the changes in the changes which were happening in the later Vedic period. So what kind of changes were there in the later Vedic period? It's coming, right? Again, I'll say the society was becoming more and more complex over the period. And this complexity is very much noticeable in which area? It can be noticeable in the polity, it can be noticeable in the economy, it can be noticeable in society, culture, religion, everywhere. Everywhere we find this complexity is an increase. Now, whenever life or the society goes through some bigger transitions or transformations, right? Some people either adjust with it, some people reject it. ठीक है? हमारे जमाने में या हमारे जमाने में भी और आपके जमाने में भी होगा, हम सब अक्सर एक बात कहते हैं, हमारा पीरियड अच्छा था, हमारा वक्त अच्छा था. कहते हैं या नहीं कहते? What is it? It means that there is a sort of rejection of the changes that have happened in the recent times. हमारे टाइम पे मोबाइल फोन नहीं थे, हम खुश थे. फिर मोबाइल फोन आया, हम दुखी हो गए. ठीक है? अभी लोग आपको ट्रेस कर सकते हैं। और अब तो इतने छोटे छोटे जो है टेक्निकल चीजें होती है, वो ब्लू टिक हुआ या नहीं, एक ही पॉइंट आया, एक ही टिक आया या दो टिक आए, दो टिक आया मतलब डिलीवर तो हो गया, वो इंसान देख नहीं रहा, छोटा मैसेज किया तो हम ये पता लगाते हैं कि उसने देख तो लिया है लेकिन उसको रिप्लाई नहीं करना, तो उसने रिप्लाई नहीं किया, वो तो बाहर ही ब्लिंक कर जाता है, इसलिए उसको अनरीड है। ये भी टेक्नोलॉजीज बताए जाते हैं छोटे छोटे उसमें वीडियोस में, कि अगर आपको ये शो करना है कि जो है आपने मैसेज पढ़ा ही नहीं, तो कैसे उसको जो है ब्लू से वापस उसको ये कर सकते हैं, ठीक है। So ये सब कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी तो है, लाइफ सिंपल। तो मे बी आई एम नॉट फीलिंग वेरी कंफर्टेबल विद दैट, राइट। सो बेसिकली व्हाट हैपेंस व्हेन द कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी इंक्रीज, राइट, कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी इज इंक्रीज इन द सोसाइटी, सम पीपल रिजेक्ट इट, राइट। So according to KP Jaiswal, what happened? Like, the changing pace of life was not suitable to many people, and this is simultaneously there was another process going on, that is the process of the Aranyakas and Upanishads. These are also those people who reject that kind of materialistic development of the society, and that is how, like, it is said that these people wanted to somehow lead a peaceful life, and that's how they have been moving towards, like, that foothills of the Himalaya, and they're establishing these two Ganasanghas. That is one idea. I'm not saying it is right or wrong. In fact, I am personally not convinced with this, right? But then I just told you that it was a reaction against the pattern of the life, right? So I told you that what is the pattern of the life, how come people were not ready to exist with it, and in fact it is like such a historical process that you can even understand with the understand in the Industrial Revolution movement in England. After the Industrial Revolution movement, like, undoubtedly the life has drastically changed, and in fact, like, the kind of life that we have been leading in the present time, it is greatly the reaction of that, or greatly the impact of that. But at that point of time, some people were not very happy with this, okay? Because industrialization somehow changed the pace of life. Now, like, life became more rapid. पहले क्या था, गांव में मस्त खाना वाना खाया, ठीक है, खाना वाना खा के रात दिन सवेरे उठे, खेत पे गए, वापस आए, शाम को जो है झाल मंजीरा लेके बैठे, गाना गा लिया, थोड़ा बर्फी का सब रस ले लिया, अरे पिंजरे वाले मुनिया, रात को जाके सो गए. Life was simple. But the moment industrialization is coming, life becomes complex. Why? Because you have to work day and night, like, that you can produce more, that you can, like, get some sort of surplus, that you can lead a better life. So it was becoming complex. Some people hated it, and that's why, like, they have started rejecting this kind of idea. So it is a common thing. So basically, in the I won't say in the initial part, but in the later part of the later Vedic period, I can say that the things were changing, and in fact some people were not very happy. Fine. So this is one interpretation. But then, the Marxist scholars, like, precisely again I'll say R.S. Sharma, and then, like, D.D. Kosambi and all, the Marxist historians have been rejecting this idea, and they're saying, no, actually the situation or the circumstances which led to the rise of these Ganasanghas, that's very different, right? And in fact, they're saying that this is resourceless region, right? You'll find the development of monarchies in which part? Gangetic plains. You find the development of the Ganasanghas in which part? The foothills of the Himalaya. So they are connecting with the resources. That if you have resources, the way, like, they connect everything with the surplus, that the social complexity and everything increases with the resources, or let's say surplus. Undoubtedly, these kind of things were not happening over there, and that's how neither you find the political complexity, nor the social complexity, nor the religious or economic complexity, and that's how there was a development of a very unique kind of state system or the state model that could be kept in the category of Ganasanghas. That's, like, the alternative model. So your answers should go in this particular flow, and you have to prove like, these are, like, various ideas. Exactly the reasons are not known. How come it, like, they are coming into existence? That's what, like, can be said. Okay. Seals, like, it's a right suggestion. Seals must be given as an example in Harappan art. I also missed it. Yes, that's really important. So you should write. So that is all about it. Yeah.
But I didn't know that whose statement it was.
I think, like, in the
It was anything.
I always used to say one thing: arguments are more important rather than the name of historians. Now, if you have been writing the name of the historians, you can impress that person, right? But it does not mean if you're not writing the name of that historians, he'll be so angry that he'll put a zero in there. That is never going to happen. Ideas are more important, right? You are not studying the history, like, history as a subject of academics. And that's why it is not being expected from you. ठीक है? तो feel free. हम नहीं जान सकते. It is impossible for you. हम मतलब आप, ठीक है? इट इज इम्पॉसिबल कि हम सबके हिस्टोरियंस का पता हो हमें कहाँ से सोर्स लिया गया। ये तो मैंने कहा ना कि मैं अपने लिए समझने की कोशिश करता हूँ कि जो है वो कहाँ से उठाया उन लोगों ने। इसका मतलब है कि ये अभी भी इसकी यूटिलिटी बनी हुई है। दैट्स द सिंपल आइडिया, नथिंग एल्स। ओके, हाउ फार did the Mauryan facilitate the diffusion of the material culture of the Gangetic plains? It's a very simple question. ठीक है, इसमें बहुत कोई complexity नहीं है. So you know that Mauryans have expanded their kingdom, right, to almost all the parts of India. Only the extreme south was not part of it, right? And then apart from the extreme south, we can say some parts such as Rajasthan wala part was not part of like their the northeast was not part of it, right? So these are the only parts which were out of the Mauryan control, right? So basically, you can use that theory which was given by Romila Thapar of core, metropolitan core and periphery. So metropolitan is the Magadh region, which was completely transformed into a state society. Core is basically that part which was still having, let's say, which was still having that knowledge of the state, and periphery is that region which were like having no idea of the state society. The point is that how did they expand, or how did they diffuse this material culture to the Gangetic plain of the Gangetic plains, basically in various parts of India. So there were multiple processes through which they had been doing it. So first of all, we'll be writing the state infrastructure and the administration. So the way they had been bringing them under their control, and they were like taking the state mechanism to this part. So ultimately, like because of what they through this they had been doing it. Next, we can talk about the trade and the economic networks, right? Undoubtedly, they had started the trade networks, right? So you see the coming of basically some some routes such as Uttarapad, Dakshinapat, and all these routes are coming. So the trade is coming. Then the agricultural and technological diffusion. Basically, the knowledge of agriculture was also something which was diffused by the Mauryans into other parts, and that's how somehow these peripheral societies also came to know that how to create this agricultural surplus. That's also one thing. That the religious patronage and the cultural integration, right? So you see that the way the Asoka was trying to expand the Buddhism or promote the Buddhism in different paths was also one thing, Then through art and culture also, once Asoka is putting his own inscriptions or let's say the pillars in different parts of the Mauryan Empire, so that was also one way. And in fact, this argument has been given that Asoka had been desperately putting it on those places which were resourceful, and that's how around this Kolar gold mines, you find certain ideas, so certain things of that. Okay. So this is how I'll be writing it. So okay, this idea is very simple. It's a very straightforward question. You can mention Romila Thapar precisely because she talks about it. How come Mauryans were capable of expanding this material culture into the various parts of it. You can even write about the impact of this. जैसे सातवाहना का rise मैं हमेशा बोलता हूँ कि एक argument है कि Mauryan culture के expand करने की वजह से होता है या state society के expand करने की वजह से होता है, ठीक है. But there was you could have concluded this answer in a very unique way. ठीक है, वो बेहतर होता. Because there was one scholar, that scholar is Ananda Kumar Swami, and he has given a very brilliant idea. It is not only about the expansion of Gangetic culture, Gangetic material culture. Rather, it was a give and take relationship. At one hand, it is imparting or it is diffusing its own culture. On the other hand, taking so many things from the regional or the tribal cultures also. So that is how the diffusion between the cultures have started. And India appears in a very different way. Okay. That was the idea which was given by him. It's a very popular historian. So that's how you could have concluded this answer. I hope you got the answer. Do you have a question? No. Okay, fine. Okay, let's move to the simple question. I think there was no doubt in this question. Fine. Examine the nature and impact of India's contacts with Central Asia during the 1st and 3rd century. See how did these interactions influence India's political, cultural, and economic sphere. 20 marks. प्रथम से तृतीय शताब्दी ईस्वी के दौरान भारत के मध्य एशिया से संपर्कों की प्रकृति एवं प्रभाव का परीक्षण करें. इन संपर्कों ने भारत के राजनीतिक, सांस्कृतिक एवं आर्थिक क्षेत्रों को किस प्रकार प्रभावित किया. दिस इज द क्वेश्चन. ठीक है, अगेन बहुत आसान क्वेश्चंस है. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल you have to write about certain political developments in this particular period that proves that there was a close interaction, or else you can also start with this period which is referred here, 1st to 3rd century, C is the period for interaction and innovation. So you can start it with these kind of things also, right? You can even quote Upendra Singh also, that she is writing it in this way. Okay, so first of all we need to write about what? We need to write about the nature of this context. So what is the nature of this context? So it is a different kind of like, we can find the different nature of this. So such as we can, first of all, we can talk about the political nature of this, right? So what is the political nature? The political nature is very simple. Just a second. Okay, so when it comes to the nature of this context, the political context. So you know that Kusanas and all were capable of, at one hand, controlling Central Asia, on the other hand, majority of the parts of North India. I won't say South India, but North India. You can refer the Kusana Empire, right? Then next you can say, like, you can write about the trade and economic exchange. So that was also part of the nature. So not only like, with Central Asia, but even other parts of Central Asia, West Asia, like, and the Eastern Europe got well connected with India because of this particular period. So the, like, this was also one thing. And the third, you can write about the cultural and religious exchange, right? This nature was not only confined to the political and the economic activities, rather the cultural, religious, such as the knowledge system is being being transferred from one to another. Then apart from that, the religious ideas are also getting, Afghanistan or the Central Asia become one of the prominent hub for Buddhism, Jainism and all these like religion. So when it comes to the nature, one more aspect that you can write is about basically the linguistic, right, exchanges. So basically at one hand, the Central Asian languages, Kharosti and all are like, coming to this part. On the other hand, Indian languages were also becoming popular in this part. So that is also one sort of nature. So when it comes to nature, like, these are the things that you are supposed to discuss. Then it comes to the second part is about the impact. Now, the points in the impacts won't be also very different. Rather, they'll remain very separate. So, political impact. So, political impact is about the formation of an empire. And for the first time, it happened that any ruler is or any dynasty is controlling not only India, but even the Central Asia. And because like it had multiple impacts, further impacts. Apart from that, what you can write? The legitimacy question has been addressed in a very different way now. Earlier, the Kshatriya, being Kshatriya was the most important way of getting legitimacy. Now, apart from that, the heterogeneity or basically the pluralism become one of the mechanism to get the legitimacy. The way you see the Kusanas, they at one hand patronizing Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, Saivism, जो मिलता है उसी को बोलता है हाँ के लेके जाओ, कोई नाराज नहीं होना चाहिए, ठीक है? So that pluralism is become like one important thing. And in fact, the way you see that different kind of surnames are coming, Rajputras and Sahunu Sahi, these kind of titles became very important for getting legitimacy. Third is about the decentralization of the administrative system, that is Satrap system, right? So these are three major political like impacts of like what you find. Next is the economic impact that you understand, the long distance trade, Silk Route, Uttarapath, Dakshinapath, and the various routes connecting like the Western Europe, sorry, Eastern Europe and then Middle East to this part. So undoubtedly there was greater economic impact. Cultural impact. So you know about the Buddhism, Jainism, expansion of Buddhism, Jainism, or religious impact, Buddhism and Jainism, the way it became popular in Central Asia. Like from here it entered into Tibet also. Like a new sect of like a new sect such as Mahayana got like popular in all these areas because of like this cultural interaction or this interaction between the two. Then you can talk about basically cultural expansion में आप religion की बात कर, sorry, language की बात कर सकते हैं कि how come the language like a new kind of languages are coming. You can talk about Mathura and Gandhara art. So this is how like you can talk about multiple impacts it had. So this is how point वाला आंसर है, ठीक है? इसमें जितने पॉइंट्स अच्छे से आप लिख पाएंगे ऑर्गेनाइज करके उतने बेहतर आपको मार्क्स मिलेंगे. When it comes to historians, frankly speaking, there is no need of greatly write about the historians in this part. But yet I can say that there are a couple of scholars like that you can quote that would be good, such as A.L. Bossum. Now A.L. Bossum is that person like who calls it a great bridge. Okay, between Central Asia and India. So undoubtedly it is a very important like remark by him. Apart from that, you can talk about like Upinder Singh. She herself has talked about this interaction between interaction and innovation. That was a period for the interaction and innovation. There was another scholar like that you can quote here. That's about the Marxist scholars economic impact ki baat karte. Kosambi you can quote. And then there was one scholar that's called as Richard Solomon, right? Richard Solomon talks about the linguistic exchange between the two regions and how the languages are flourishing. So northeast, northwest got so many unique and the different languages. So he precisely talks about the languages. That is like what you can write in this answer. So मुझे बहुत complex नहीं लगा, simple है. आप कितने अच्छे facts डाल सकते हैं, कितने अच्छे points डाल सकते हैं, वो आपके marks decide करेगा. But then possibility was there to get like very good marks in this particular question. Okay. Now coming to fourth A.
The dynamics of social mobility in early medieval India was shaped by complex interplay of the caste hierarchy, religious legitimation, economic transformation, and political patronage. Critically assess how these factors collectively reconfigured the structure of early medieval Indian society. और इससे ज्यादा खतरनाक क्या कर सकते थे? ठीक है, कुछ नहीं छोड़ा है. They have included everything. Exactly how I did discuss this question when I was taking those sessions. और मैंने कैटेगोरिकली बोला कि देख के जाओ, आजकल खूब खेलते हैं इसके साथ ये लोग. So I cannot say कि exactly कहीं से statement लिया गया है. Undoubtedly this is a statement which has been framed. But then writing answer of this question would be really interesting, I must say. Now उसको जिस तरीके से कैलकुलेशन लगाते हैं ना, वैसे ही देख लीजिए. द डायनामिक्स ऑफ सोशल मोबिलिटी, दिस इज द कोर ऑफ दिस आइडिया. व्हाट इज सोशल मोबिलिटी दैट यू अंडरस्टैंड? मतलब द कास्ट, लाइक यू नो, द basically once you are going or bypassing the caste, like, you know, limitations or the varna limitations, or let's say some religious identities, you are, like, you know, surpassing it or you are bypassing it. So basically these are the things which are called as social mobility. So social mobility ke andar we can talk about the integration or let's say transition of the people, basically the jisko aap proliferation of caste kehte hain, theek hai, ya hinduization kehte hain ya brahmanization kehte hain. Hinduization, I'm taking my words back, not hinduization, brahmanization kehte hain. Then the coming of multiple caste system, proliferation of caste, right, expansion of the brahmanical culture. Now these are the things which are indicating towards the social mobility of the society, right? Now the question is asking social mobility. I hope you have understood this point, ki what are the social mobility. So you can start the answer with the social mobility in the early medieval period. The early medieval period is known precisely for multiple kind of social mobilities, and I have already told you. You can write the word Hinduization, you can write the word proliferation of the caste system, you can write the word about the multiplicity in the religion or like, you know, religion or basically the religious sects. That is also, like, you know, somehow marking the like, you know, marking basically that social mobility. And in fact the social mobility in terms of frequent movement. Now every part of India got settled. अभी तक बहुत सारे पार्ट है जो सेटल नहीं हुए. सो दैट इवन सिक्योर्ड द फिजिकल मोबिलिटी ऑफ पीपल फ्रॉम वन रीजन टू अनदर रीजन. दैट्स आल्सो द फिजिकल मोबिलिटी, राइट? सो दिस इज हाउ यू कैन टॉक अबाउट द मल्टीपल काइंड ऑफ सोशल मोबिलिटी दैट इज प्रिसाइजली नोटिस, लाइक, यू नो, ड्यूरिंग दिस पीरियड. नाउ ही इज सेइंग, द क्वेश्चन इज सेइंग कि इट वाज shaped a complex it was shaped by a complex interplay of the caste hierarchy, right, religious legitimation, economic transformation and the political patronage. So चार पॉइंट उन्होंने पूछे हैं and you have to connect it, right? So the caste hierarchies. So basically the social mobility, like, you know, in the caste hierarchies. So you understand that once the Brahmanization or the process of Brahmanization does take place, so after this process of the Brahmanization, what happens? Ultimately, in different region, the different caste is coming, right? The moment it comes to, like, you know, classification of the people into multiple caste, and the way the concept of hierarchy becomes very important in caste. So a sort of mobility started among the people for upgrading themselves or by like for getting recognized as the higher caste. ठीक है? So that secured the social mobility. Could you get my point? ठीक है कि अभी कास्ट में हायरार्की आपको समझ में आना चाहिए. कास्ट में हायरार्की सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज होती है. कुछ जाति जो है ऊंचे होते हैं, कुछ जाति नीची होती है. ठीक है? When it comes to the tribal societies, precisely, they were mostly egalitarian. So once this new identity was imposed over them, now they really became impatient, and that secured some sort of, like, you know, caste hierarchies. Okay, religious legitimation, right? So religious legitimation, as in, like, you know, either they were happy with Brahmanism or they were non-happy, right, or not happy. If they're happy with the Brahmanism, majority of them were not, because those who are getting the higher status, they might be happy. Those who are not getting, like, you know, higher, like, you know, identity, they must not be happy. So what was the way out? What was the way out? क्या तरीका था? The best way out of this was that you start patronizing or supporting the new religious identities. And that is how in the early medieval period you'll find that there are so many religious sects or cults became very popular. Somewhere it is Saivism becoming popular, Vaishnavism becoming popular, like Tantrism, Vajrayana. So multiple religious sects and the cults were becoming popular. The reason is very simple, because it was connected to the social mobility. Those who were unhappy with this, like, you know, they had been doing it. Okay. Then the economic transformation, right? So the people precisely following that egalitarian culture, like, you know, they were not economically very sound or materialistically very sound. With the expansion of Brahmanism through the land donations, ultimately what happens? Now they economically become integrated. So this is the period for the integration of all these tribal people. So when they were economically integrated or socially integrated, that had done economic integration, and that's how this class or this society also became very particular about economic or the materialistic development, right? That is the reason because of what social mobility is coming. Now you know that caste identity was deciding their occupation. Do you really believe that people would be accepting these kind of tagging without any objection? No. So that is how when it comes to the economic transformation, since India was being transformed drastically, specifically I'll say the non-state societies, matlab Deccan ho gaya, South India ho gaya, Rajasthan ho gaya, these are the parts which are facing this, and that's how in order to upgrade themselves in the social order, they went for the economic transformation also. So either it is about the practice of agriculture or the practice of trade and commerce. That's how it is connected. And then political patronage. So you know that political powers in this particular period, since there was a decentralization, new political powers were coming. And in fact, these political powers were also looking for the legitimacy. So they'd be looking for the legitimacy from which people? From the same people, na? कहाँ से legitimacy लेंगे? So that is how in order to get the legitimacy, if it was needed, they also patronize the social mobility, such as what is Bhakti movement. Bhakti movement could be also seen as a mechanism for the social mobility only, right? So that's how you can connect all this. Fine. So यहाँ पे ये आंसर लिखना was bit tough, I must say. थोड़ा सा मुश्किल था, but एक पॉइंट को पकड़ के एक पैराग्राफ आपको लिखना पड़ता, and then you could have conveyed कि they all are ultimately integrated. And the next part is the critically access how these factors collectively reconfigured the structure of the early medieval society. So you just need to write about the several new institutions coming up in this particular period. So there you can talk about basically the new political institutions, right? Decentralization. And here now you do not find that same previous notion continued that those who are Kshatriyas, they could become the rulers. Not necessarily the South Indian rulers were Kshatriyas, right? So it is a reconfiguration of the polity. Economy. Right. Again, you find that India became economically very diverse in this point, like multiple occupations, because it was very much depending on the ecology also. So that's how you find the reconfiguration of economy. Society, you understand what are the reconfiguration, and then religion also and the culture also you can write about this reconfiguration of the society. That's what you need to write in this answer. Could you understand the point? It was a tough question, practically speaking. क्योंकि इतनी सारी चीजें समेटना भी आसान नहीं था एक आंसर में ना. दैट इज हाउ इट बिकम्स वेरी टफ. तो अगेन दुश्मनी निकाली किसी ने आप लोगों से. Okay, discuss the circumstances which led to the conflict between Pallavas and the Chalukyas and mention how this rivalry shaped the power dynamics in South India. A simple question, I think there's no complexity. The moment it comes to the conflict between the two. So basically one is the certain lucrative resource centers. Right. So when it comes to the lucrative resource centers, so what are the most important one? So basically certain deltas. Trishna and Tungbhadra delta was one important. Second, we can talk about the power dynamics, right? Power dynamics as in both, one is ruling from Vatapi, one is ruling from Kanchipuram. Both were having the common boundaries. So in fact, both of them wanted to become the supreme power of South India. That is also one important reason. The third, you can say by that time the Southeast Asian trade was flourishing, right? So both of them wanted to have or exercise greater control over it. So Chalukyas wanted to somehow monetize it. They wanted to make their access to it. On the other hand, Pallavas wanted to keep it precisely under their control. That was also one reason. Fine. So you'll be writing, okay, these are 3-4 factors, important factors for this struggle. You can start with this struggle. You can mention about certain rulers and all. Factual information about dekh lijiyega aap answer mein, theek hai. And then how come it shaped the power dynamics in South India. Power dynamics as in here. Now, first of all, because of the long rivalry between the two, ultimately both of them could not become powerful. एक बार इसने उसको हराया, एक बार उसने उसको हराया, ठीक है. दोनों ने एक दूसरे के कैपिटल पे कंट्रोल किया, इधर पुलकेशिन सेकंड, ठीक है, या नरसिंह वर्मन की आप बात कर सकते हैं, ठीक है. तो ये सब उन लोगों ने किया और अल्टीमेटली क्या हुआ, बोथ ऑफ देम कुड नॉट बिकम द biggest power in South India, and that ultimately shaped in form of decentralization of South India. Then smaller kingdoms are coming, okay, and that is how you see the decentralization. That's how you're going to write this answer. Again, it's not a very complicated answer as such. Okay, Last question of this part. Critically evaluate the major stages in the development of art and literature in early medieval India and explain how these stages reflect wider changes in society and the patterns of patronage during the period. Khatarnak question hai ye bhi. Okay. Critically evaluate the major stages of the development of art and literature, right, in early medieval India and explain how these stages reflect wider changes in the society and the patterns of patronage during the period. So first of all, when it comes to the major stages, so it is basically you need to write about the transition. Okay? Transition from what? Transition from the classical to region. Precisely, it is noticeable in which, like, which area? Art and literature. So Gupta period is known as the classical age. The moment you enter into the early medieval period, instead of classical, it becomes regional. Sanskrit literature, Nagara, or like an art form, or even in the sculpture making, you find like the sense of classical was there. Then the moment you enter into early medieval period, it becomes literature, and it becomes regional. So you need to write basically the regional art forms which are developing, and in fact, like you need to precisely discuss about art, and the second is literature, right? Art mein precisely you need to write about this temple architecture. Literature is about multiple form of literature. So basically, when it comes to one by one, you need to deal with this architecture of the temple, architecture. You know that what are the things you are supposed to discuss. You have to talk about basically the various temple art forms. Okay? So it's not about only Dravidian or Nagara, or let's say Vesara. Within that, so many regional styles started emerging. Pallava is there, Cholas are there, Chalukyas are there, Hoysalas are there. Okay? There were so many different styles that have been emerging in this particular period. That continued even later on also. Okay? When it comes to the literature also, in literature also you can find that the varieties. Literature, you can find that multiple of regional languages are becoming popular. So you can talk about the multiple languages such as, you can talk about, Tamil, Telugu, then Kannada, then in North India also multiple languages are emerging. Such if it is about early medieval India, then you can talk about basically, Marathi, Sorseni, Upabhrans, these languages are developing. So you can talk about that multiple, sort of developments were happening here. And in fact, the way you find that the multiplicity in art and literature, and in fact next you write to how they they were having the wider changes in the society and the pattern of patronage. So when it comes to the society, so you need to write about the various identities simultaneously developing, right? So you know that about in this particular period, the regional cultural identity, right, was the most important one, and in fact it was happening. And somehow the way I did tell you that people have started choosing a specific art form, a specific temple architecture or a particular literature, and in fact this even got connected with this will be connected with what? Even this will be connected with basically the political powers also. Now the political powers are also looking for legitimacy, and that's how they had been supporting it. So basically everything got connected, interconnected, and that there was a sort of what? Interaction between all these factors, and that's one was impacting other. So society is getting influenced by art, and in return art was influencing the society, such as temple architecture. Now temple architecture is also playing a very crucial role for the caste identities, right? Just now I had been discussing in one of the questions, I had been discussing about the caste hierarchy, right? So just tell me any caste which is closely associated with the temple, whether it would be falling in the higher caste or the lower caste. Higher caste, right? Whenever any temple ritual is being conducted, so the castes which are getting the chance to sit closer to the rituals, they'll be considered as the higher caste. So that is how an interplay was going on between the art and the society. So temples were very much deciding the social changes which were happening in this period. So by donating some more money to the temple, somehow you could have upgraded yourself in the caste order. So these kind of interplays were going, and in fact the political powers Patronage, like when it is written patronage, it does not mean it is precisely about political power. Rather, it is also about the society, the way it was patronizing various forms. And this is how you can say it was having multiple impacts over the society of that particular period. So this question was really a tough question. So only once you have a great conceptual understanding of the early medieval period, you would have right. Acha, dono hi early medieval period mein I didn't discuss about the historians. Undoubtedly, the people like B.D. Chattopadhyay is one important scholar that you should definitely write. Then Harman Kulke is there, Harbans Mukhya is there. Okay, Chattopadhyay is the most important one. जो आपके answer में जरूर होना चाहिए, because these kind of things have been discussed precisely by him only. So that's all about this particular question. This is it, So that's all about this ancient question. Let's move to the medieval questions. Okay, section B. Look, one thing. Earlier also I did tell you, now also I'll say I'll repeat the same thing once again. When it comes to the medieval questions, don't be under this impression that the way historians are very much needed in ancient, in the same fashion historians are very much needed in the medieval one also. Frankly, no. There are certain questions, if I'll talk precisely of the question of this year, maybe there were a couple of questions where it was needed. You could have written it, your answer could have become better, but it is not something which is precisely needed, right? Okay, fine. So when it comes to the first question, that's a compulsory question. You do not have choice. Religious themes inspired a large section of literature in provincial language in the late medieval India. So religious themes inspired a large section of literature in provincial languages in late medieval. Okay, fine. Now there are a couple of words to be noticed here. पहली बार में शायद मैंने भी नहीं किया था. This question is saying late medieval. Late medieval मतलब Mughal period, right? So when it is medieval, it does not mean you have been writing all these developments. Specifically, you need to be careful while giving the facts in this answer. Now the question is religious themes inspired a large section of literature. So first of all, you need to understand what are the religious themes which are there. So one is the various emergence of various sects under Bhakti movement and Sufi movement. Fine. So Bhakti movement में there are some very important sects such as Nanak Panthi हो गया, ठीक है, Kabir Panthi हो गए. So these are various Tulsidas हो गए, ठीक है. So you need to write about the various religious themes. So you can start from here कि as an impact of the Bhakti movement and Sufi movement, numbers of religious themes that appears in form of sects and cults, because follower of every primary sect of the Bhakti or Sufi movement, you can find a cult or sect developing, such as the followers of Kabir were called as Kabir Panthi. So it was a different sect. Nanak Panthi, it was a different sect. So this is how the religious themes. So this religious themes could be not only noticed under Hinduism, but even in Islam also, because of the Sufi movement. Because some of the silsilas, such as Naqshbandi, Qadiriya, they were becoming more popular during the Mughal period. So when you talk about the Chistis, remain very popular in this period also. So this is how I'll be writing about how religious themes were there. Now the question is asking about its impact over basically the religious, the provincial languages. So since it was a sort of common movement, or it was more close to the society, and that's how they have started nurturing what? They have started nurturing the regional languages, right? And that's how the maximum development, right, in the regional languages, that includes Hindi, right, Bengali, then Marathi, Gujarati, Punjabi. So all these languages ultimately flourish. So here you need to include certain certain factual information, and you need to write, okay, this was the concept, and under which multiple creations were there. So you can mention Ramcharitmanas, you can mention Ramcharitmanas, the Adi Granth Sahib. So you need to the various writings by Kabir, the Bijaks and all, right? And they had been adopting many local languages. कहीं पे अवधी है, ब्रज भाषा है, भोजपुरी है. So how come it's being flourished? And in fact, the provincial languages are developing during this particular period. That's how you're supposed to write this answer. Okay. Marathi also you can mention. So this is how you could write this answer. So it's not very complicated one. It is more depending on the what sort of facts do you have. But then ठीक है, आसान था. मुझे लगा ये question बहुत tough नहीं. Next question. Evaluate Alauddin Khilji's economic measures aimed at centralizing political authority in Delhi Sultanate. Right. Okay, so fine. When it comes to this question, Alauddin Khilji's economic measures, not very tough. You understand ki what are they? So market reform is there, land revenue reform is there. Majorly to yahi do hai, market reforms or land revenue reform. So you have to write in the first part that what are the major economic reforms of this person, right? And by giving a brief idea of those economic reforms that you don't need to explain a lot, and then further you need to come to the analysis, right? So why was this? So it is just one idea that probably he wanted to kind of like centralize the political authority. That's why he had been doing it. So he had been doing it for multiple reasons. So centralization was not one idea. This may be just one idea that he wanted to confine every control in his own hand, and that's why he had been doing it. But then you know about some other threats, such as the way he wanted to conquer Deccan. The Mongol threat is also there, right? Apart from that, when it comes to centralization, there you need to write about the Iqtidas, the way the Muktis and Walis had been perpetually challenging the central Sultanate authority, because they had been normally revolting. There was no connection between the Sultan and these people. They were not passing any revenue to them, right? So that's how it was creating a problem. So Iltutmish established this system, but somehow it could not be consolidated. Balban tried for it, but he also failed in doing so. Alauddin Khilji somehow continued that process. He wanted to bring everybody under his control. That's how he had been trying all these kind of things. And for that, it was necessary. Well, what is the repercussion of the Iqta system? Since there was a decentralization of the army, so some number of troops were there under Sultan, but the majority of them were under the Iqtidas. So the Sultan was heavily dependent on what? Iqtidas. And if the Iqtidas are opposing the Sultan, in that case, it would be really tough for the Sultan. So जब आप economically अपने आप को powerful बनाना चाहते हैं, इसका मतलब you wanted to make yourself capable of holding a huge army. That was possible only once only once you have some monetary strength, right? And in fact उसको कैसे settle कर सकते हैं आप? उसके market reform से बता सकते हैं, या फिर उसके land revenue reform से बता सकते हैं कि this is what he wanted. And on the other hand, as I told you, that he had been continuously trying. Not only he wanted to control the Iqtidas, but even the intermediaries also. As Barni writes, in fact you should definitely mention Barni here. Barni writes that he was even interested in controlling the power of the intermediaries like Rai, Rana, Rawat and all, right? And you know that a couple of restrictions were imposed over them also. Now they could not keep anything extra, और कहते थे कि जिसके पास भी थोड़ा एक्स्ट्रा मिल गया उसका जो है बहुत सीवियर पनिशमेंट देते थे उसको. So he'll be writing कि yes, undoubtedly that may be one reason behind it, but that you should go for a critical analysis also. You'll be writing, oh, this must not be the sole reason, rather some other reasons were also there, such as the Deccan conquest and then Mongol invasions, right? All these aspects are there. That's it. Okay. Critically assess the role of imperial karkhanas in Mughal India. That is okay. Okay. How did they reflect the ideological and functional imperatives of the Mughal state? That is the second part, is slightly complicated. Okay, fine. Let's come to this question. Now, this question is saying ki first of all, the critically assess the role of imperial karkhanas. So, role of karkhanas you understand. Okay. So, Mughals, when it comes to the palace or the fort, so it was not about one family, rather the whole settlement used to be there. And as far as their requirements were considered, it was really it would be very problematic and costly to fulfill their needs, and that's the reason because of what the Karkhana system was established. Now it is not a new initiative, rather it was already there. You know that Sultanate, in the Sultanate period also this concept was there, but somehow they became more organized and the structure under the Mughals. Now what are the various things? So they had been supplying first of all the army requirements. You understand what are the army requirements. Then certain things which were being consumed in the court and the harem, that was also being provided by them. Okay. Apart from that, there were several other things which were needed in order to maintain that system. That is also there. So they had a proper system of this Karkhana. There was a particular person called as Mere Saman. That person used to head the Karkhanas, and it is considered to be a very important position, Mere Saman. So that he used to call it. Now the second part of the question is telling how it was ideological and the functional imperative, right? So ideological as in the Mughals were somehow trying to patronize a particular art form, which could be called as the Mughal art. Fine. Or the Mughal culture, not art precisely, I'll say the Mughal culture. So if you develop a particular thing that can be called as the Mughal culture, so you must be understanding the ideas behind it. Right now also, when we enter into the restaurant, there's something called as Mughlai food. If we wear certain kind of attire, that's considered to be the Mughlai kurta or the Mughlai pajama, वो सब अलग होते हैं जो मिर्जा वाले होते थे, ठीक है. So they have created a distinct, or they wanted to create a distinct culture which could be identified as the that Mughal culture. What would be the benefit of this? If you are able to somehow establish a culture that's called as Mughal culture, in that case, undoubtedly, it would help you in getting legitimacy. So, उनका एक ideological idea है, ठीक है. अच्छा, apart from that, they wanted to show their wealth, their prosperity through this, that they could create a sort of aura. आप हर चीज में मुगल के देखेंगे lavishness है, ठीक है. इतना lavishness क्यों? क्या मुगल्स के पास बहुत पैसा था? शायद नहीं. But वो lavishness के through they had been trying to get the legitimacy. अभी भी when you visit the museum, you'll find that the Mughal clothes or the Mughal suits or the Mughal everything, they're literally very unique. Why? Because they just wanted to maintain these kind of things because of what, right? And then the functional imperative. I have already told you that if they could have purchasing all this stuff from outside, so it won't be very pretty fair for them and costly affair for them. That is the reason because of what they had been doing it. And in fact, whatsoever requirements were there, they could have been fulfilled within the palace rather than they needed to go outside. That is the idea. Apart from that, you can also talk about the integration of the regional cultures also. So whatsoever they found good, they integrated it here. That was also ऐसे भी Mughal culture heterogeneity के लिए थोड़ा बहुत जाना जाता, तो that point also would have been written over there. Okay. Next, the principle of Sikhism represented a harmonious blend of Islamic and Indic religious belief and practices, right? This question was again asked in a very unexpected question. But then of course it is not a very tough question. When it comes to Sikhism, right? When it comes to Sikhism, so you know that Sikhism is having late development. So Sikhism started with Guru Nanak towards the end of 15th century, but then Sikhism does not convert into a religion in 15th century or 16th century. Later, somewhere in 17th century, it started, 16th and 17th century, it started converting into a religion. So you'll be writing that how come Sikhism converts into a religion? Because when it is saying Sikhism, right, Guru Nanak never laid the foundation of Sikhism, though he is considered. But then he was never willing to put the foundation of Sikhism as a religion. Rather, he was precisely a social reformer. So from the 4th or the 5th Guru, you can find that gradually it started developing certain identities, right? Such as Guru Granth Sahib is coming, then his things were being compiled over here. So that's how we can say gradually it was converting into religion in 16th and 17th century. Precisely we can say in 17th century it converted into a religion. So it goes to or it converts into a religion through a gradual way, and in fact the basics of this was falling in the the harmonious relation between the society or among the society, and that's how we can find it as a blend of Islamic and the Indic religious tradition. So there are several things. Indic, so you all understand, multiple things have been taken from the Bhakti movement. So what are the things that you can talk about? Monotheism, that has been taken from, okay. So in fact in Sikhism there was a word being used as ek onkar, okay. मतलब एक ही God है, one God is there. That is there in Bhakti movement also. That is there even in the Islam also. That's called as Tawahid. Tawahid is Tawhid. Tawahid. That's called as oneness of the God. So it was more popular among the Sufism, among the Sufis. Next is the rejection of the ritualism in the orthodoxy. It was being done by everybody, okay. Specifically the Bhakti movement, Sufi movement, they all had been opposing it. The spiritual synthesis, that's another thing. You can find that they had been taking the ideas from all the possible sects and the cults. So at one hand, they were taking the idea from Sheikh Farid also. Unke bhi jo hai, ya Malik Muhammad Jaisi, unki bhi jo poetries hai, they are included in Guru Granth Sahib, okay. On the other hand, several Bhakti saints also contributed here. That we can talk about Ravidas and then Namdev, they have also contributed it. So it is nothing but a sort of integration of the various ideas. That's also one thing. Egalitarian concept. Sikhism is all based on the egalitarianism, right? And in fact, that idea has been taken precisely from the Islam. Islam was an egalitarian movement, and in Sikhism also there is no hierarchy. Okay, that's also one thing. The Guru Sishya Parampara, the Peer and Murid system, that is in Islam or Sufism, that has continued even here also, that you understand, like that also, like it's a very common thing. So these are couple of things that you need to write in this answer. So factual question iska kuch aisa wo nahi hai. At the end you can write that there are certain things developed by them, like developed by them also. So you can't say everything had been copied, like certain original things were also evolved by them. Okay, fine. Next point is the gunpowder changed the character of the warfare in India during the Mughal era. Simple to write. Okay. Before gunpowder, like normally the iron weapons were being used by the people, right? Then it got changed, and after that you can find that the things have completely got changed. So first of all, you can talk about the new firearms are coming, cannons, like the muskets, cannons, like these are the new things, and you can understand that now they were more impactful, and that's how the previous weapons did not remain very powerful. Okay. Then certain tactics were being, or strategies were being followed, such as you might have read in the Satish Chandra's book also, like such as the Persian style, the Ottoman style, Tulguma style, like these are the new styles were coming. Now why these new styles? Because now you have, say, sort of specific weapon through which you can really create great amount of destruction. So they had been arranging it in such a way that they could, like create a great destruction. That's also one thing. Earlier, like the forts used to be almost they could not be destroyed. After the coming of the cannons and all, it becomes quite easy for that. Okay, fine. Then the army configuration also got changed. Earlier, there were certain battalions, but then now this battalion, which was having the artillery, which is called as artillery, was became that became the most important one. Okay. So this is how we can talk about change the character of the warfare. These are the some important thing that you can talk about. Later on, in fact, you can include one point because it is not precisely asked for anybody. Mughal era ke bare mein pucha. So you can write the Portuguese. They have started placing the cannons in their ships also, and that's how now they became very powerful. And in fact, that is one reason because of what they had been enjoying such kind of power. Okay, that's the idea which you are supposed to discuss. Okay, fine. Next point, question 6A. Discuss the structural features of Todermal's revenue system and evaluate its effectiveness in standardized land revenue assessment in India. I think it's a very simple and the straightforward question. So when it comes to land revenue settlement, so you know about the first of all is the measurement of the land is what the one unique specification of this, right? And then second is about the classification of land. That is the second thing. The third is about the fixation of land revenue, and the fixation was done as per the local rates, right? In fact, the peasantry was getting this freedom to pay either in kind or cash. That was also one freedom of it. So basically, you need to discuss it in a very structured format. These are the spatial structural features of Todermal's land revenue system. You can even mention Shershah Suri, who had initiated this, that further culminated under Akbar, under Akbar, because of the efforts of Todermal. That's what you can write. The effectiveness and the standardized offer, right? So basically, you can say that undoubtedly it is considered to be one of the most effective land revenue settlement ever being implemented in India. So you can write both the positive and the negative. So basically, the way you know that it was very scientific. In fact, you can write about how they have been using the new measurement unit, Gaje Ilahi jisko hum kehte hain, and it was made of bamboo rather than rope because certain complex were there, right? Patta system was coming where Kabuliyat jisko kehte hain. So only when the peasants are accepting it, then only it is being imposed. So aisa nahi tha ki arbitrarily it's being imposed over them. That's also one positive thing. The cash flow increased for the for the court or for the Mughals, right? So these are certain positive things. Certain negative things were also there, because the way it's being planned, ultimately it was not being implemented in the same way. This yet remains a question whether only the Khalisa land was measured or even the Mansab land was also measured. ये अभी भी clear नहीं है. Even Irfan Habib is not able to make it clear whether it was done it or not. In his book, that's called as a green structure in Mughal India. So there are certain limitations are also there in this. And when it comes to the historians, undoubtedly, whenever you're talking about the land revenue system, without any question, Irfan Habib, right? So his book, is agrarian structure in Mughal India, and in fact which is precisely based on Ain-e-Akbari written by Abul Fazl, which is giving a sort of wide description of the land revenue settlement under the Mughals. So majority sometimes so it is also being said कि अकबर नामा को इंग्लिश में कर दिया है इरफान हबीब ने, and that has become like agrarian structure in Mughal India. जो भी है ठीक है. So बस एक स्कॉलर का नाम लेने से इसमें मुझे लगता है चल जाता. Max to max you could have written about Satish Chandra also, but it's not needed. आपने सतीश चंद्र पढ़ा तो लोग सतीश चंद्र लिख देते हैं कई बार. ठीक है. Okay. Question number 6B. Barni's fatwa in Jahandari was not a proper account of Delhi Sultanate, rather a lament. That's a good question that they have So Barni has written two books. One is Fatwa in Jahandari and the second is Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi. So both are different in nature. Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi is basically a biographical account. So which is giving the description of multiple rulers that have ruled in Delhi Sultanate, that starts from Iltutmish and goes up to Firoz Shah Tughlaq, right? So बहुत सारे rulers का description दिया. So that is in fact it is called also as like Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi. That means Tarikh मतलब at that point of time it used to be history only. Fatwa in Jahandari was basically an ideological text like Arthashastra and all, right? So basically how the administration should be, that he writes in his book. And in fact, he was highly disappointed from the various rulers, that those who have ruled, and specifically the rulers like Muhammad bin Tughlaq and all, those who have tried to create a sort of harmonious culture in India. So this book called as Fatwa in Jahandari is precisely inspired by Sariyat and Hadith, right? Specifically, I'll say Sariyat. So he just wanted that the Muslim rulers should rule in India as per the Islamic principles of Sariyat. So they should convert it into a Darul Islam, right? They should give special weightage to the ulema class, right? They should implement the Sariyat in India, right? And in fact, they should collect the jizya and all these taxes from India, jizya, pilgrimage taxes and all, right? So this is, and he had criticized all these rulers in this Fatwa in Jahandari. Those who were Alauddin Khilji was not he was not liking Alauddin Khilji. Why? Because Alauddin Khilji after a particular moment realized that religion is not helping him, rather religion is creating problem for him. Muhammad bin Tughlaq was a very was a very liberal person with respect to religion, and that's how he had been criticizing all this. So this is the reason because of what most of the time he had been criticizing everybody. He's happy with just one person called as Firoz Shah. Why Firoz Shah Tughlaq? Because this person was following more Islamic principle religiously, and that's how he had been praising him. Otherwise, he has been criticizing everybody. Though you understand that Firoz Shah Tughlaq was the most incapable ruler out of Iltutmish, Balban, Alauddin Khilji, and then Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Yes. So this is the reason because of rather a lament. Lament मतलब क्या होता है? रोना किसी बात को लेकर. रोतलू था वो भी जो है नहीं ऐसा होना चाहिए ऐसा करके वो लिखता है. So this is what you need to write about Barni sir. Okay. Any question in this point?
और पहले फिरोज शाह तुगलक ने इम्प्रेशन कर दिया था, वो तो जाहिर सी बात है वो तो अच्छा ही देखेगा
किसको?
बर्नी.
हाँ
तो जाहिर सी बात है गेट रिस्पेक्टेड इन बैंक.
हाँ अच्छा लिखेगा, बट ठीक है मतलब ऐसा भी थोड़ी कि जब फिरोज शाह तुगलक मोहम्मद बिन तुगलक के तो खराब लिख ही रहा है अब, लेकिन उसके बाद भी फिरोज शाह तुगलक उसको वो करते हैं. सो अंडरस्टैंड फिरोज शाह तुगलक के भी व्यूज कैसे हैं कि फिरोज शाह तुगलक भी थोड़ा इंक्लाइंड है. तो जब इंसान कमजोर होता है तो इसका किसी और बात से कोई लेना देना नहीं है. इंसान जब थोड़ा वीक होता है तो रिलीजन का सहारा लेता है. खासकर जब पॉलिटिकल पावर्स थोड़ा वीक हो जाते हैं तो दे ऑलवेज ट्राई टू टेक द हेल्प ऑफ रिलीजन. फिरोज शाह तुगलक हैड बीन आल्सो ट्राइंग टू डू द सेम सॉर्ट ऑफ थिंग. ठीक है. कौन? बाबर जिहाद का सहारा लेता है. बिल्कुल, ये तो बहुत कॉमन कंसेप्ट है, तो हर कोई लेता है. ठीक है, दैट्स द रीजन. किसके साथ? फिरोज शाह तुगलक. हाँ करेक्ट. नो Harsraj, coming to your question, it is not precisely the Mughal period. ठीक है. Mughal period में there was more use of the gunpowder and all, because undoubtedly it was introduced in the Sultanate period, but then it became more popular only once Babur is coming to India, and Babur has made it more popular. So that's how you should precisely write about Babur, Babur or let's say Mughals. Okay, fine. Next question. Discuss the development of Hindi literature under the Mughal patronage. How did the Bhakti and Sufi movements influence it? This is precisely a factual question, right? Isme there is nothing as such like to be discussed. So look, discuss the development of Hindi literature under the Mughal patronage. Frankly speaking, under the Mughal patronage, there was no great development of Hindi as a literature, right? Or Hindi as a language. Rather, I can say that some languages which later on contributed to the Hindi, such as Kadi Boli, Braj Bhasa, Avadi, they started flourishing, right? And in fact, like numbers of authors have started writing under this or in this particular language. So Mughals were not precisely patronizing Hindi. They have been patronizing the other languages that ultimately help in the flourishment of the. So you just need to write about the various contributions such as the translation department, the patronization of couple of like bhakti scenes. जैसे तुलसीदास को लोग invite करते थे कि you should come to the court and all, right? Akbar was doing it. So ये थोड़े बहुत factual information है, ठीक है? इसमें कुछ ऐसा कुछ नहीं कर सकते. The only thing I'll say that in this like question you should mention Sheldon Pollock, एक scholar है Sheldon Pollock, who talks about the linguistic diversity or the linguistic development in India, specifically in early medieval and medieval period. So Sheldon Pollock एक scholar है, वो जरूर होना चाहिए था इसमें, ठीक है? वो आपको लिखना चाहिए था. अगर आप Sheldon Pollock, इसमें कम पड़ेगा मुझे भी, मतलब देखो, when you go for a research you can find n number of content, right? Frankly speaking the content will be less in this question, ठीक है? जितना हम लोग आर्ट एंड कल्चर पढ़ते हैं उसके हिसाब से कम है, ये तो मैं एक्सेप्ट करूंगा. ओके फाइन, नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. तो जरूरी थोड़ी है कि यार यही क्वेश्चन लिखना, तो छोड़ देते इस पे. तब तो पहला क्वेश्चन तो इतना अच्छा था. एंशिएंट से 3 क्वेश्चन किया और इधर से 2 क्वेश्चन, बहुत मजे से होगा. Yes, simple question है that is, Portuguese maritime power disrupted the character of trade in Indian Ocean in the 16th century. So when it is talking about like the destruction or the disrupted the character, so basically you need to write how was the trade before 16th century, right? So you need to write about the Muslim traders. What was the nature of this trade under the Muslim traders, right? So the way they had been collecting the stuff from the various parts. Sometimes they were getting the stuff from the Southeast Asian countries also. Then they were holding like landing in India, and then from here they used to take it away to the European countries, right? So that's how the nature of the trade was there. And in fact, it was quite lucrative for India, I must say. What are the commodities being like they had been trading? But then further what happened, the European power enters, precisely the Portuguese enters, and in fact like now you could write in the point how come they have disrupted. So you know about the various things, okay? I don't need to discuss about it, what are the various disruptions they have created. Carthage system, the monopolization, like the way they tried to become the territorial power. All the important cities were captured by them. So either it is about Goa or like कौन से हैं साउथ में जितने भी हैं, कोचिन हो गए, ठीक है, माहे हो गए, ठीक है. They tried to control all these centers, right? Apart from that, like the religious bigotry, I must say, the way they wanted to promote the Christianity, and that's how they made the local people hostile. Pehle kya tha, local people were always cooperating with the traders. Why? Because that was adding in their prosperity. Now further what happened, because of the Portuguese, people started hating these kind of like traders and all. The forcible marriages, like the way he promoted his his own employees to marry the local girls, that was also one thing. The Muslim settlements got destroyed here. So there were numbers of negative impacts that you can talk about. But then maritime power disrupted. Okay, negative aspect has been written. But then in the conclusion you can write apart from this also they set a trend of the massive trade between India, Europe and Southeast Asia. That's also one thing. How you can make the factories, how you can collect the stuff here. So a positive part be that you can end the answer with this. Nothing, no historiography is needed in this question as such. Okay. 7b. Akbar's Rajput policy was saved by the consideration of functional politics in the Mughal court. Discuss. Fine. Very easy question. The functional politics. Functional politics matlab, like, you know, he just wanted to make the Mughal rule smooth. And that's how he had certain practical need or the requirement because of what he had been going for the Rajput policy. It is not even asking that, like, you know, and what is discussed. So you don't need to go for a critical analysis also. There might be a critical analysis. So first of all, he was suggested by his father itself, right? Rajputs must be made as friend because they are the biggest enemy. Humayun was suggested this by some Iranian scholars. If you have to rule over India, in that case, you have to somehow make the Rajputas friend. Okay? That's one thing that you should write. Acha, Humayun was already aware of the image of Rana Sanga and all. So they had a very, like, you know, glorious image of Rana Sanga. That was also sometimes making them scary. That's also one thing. Apart from this, we can say that their locality was as such, or their region was as such, which was literally very tough to conquer. You remember, like, you know, when Shershah Suri was trying to conquer Kalinjar, at that point of time, he was almost to lose this battle, but somehow he won. He, like, you know, conquered Kalinjar. But उसने लिखा था, एक statement दिया था कि मुट्ठी भर बाजरे के चक्कर में पूरा हिंदुस्तान खो देता है ना? तो इसका मतलब है कि आप समझो कि उस रीजन्स को कॉन्कर करना इतना आसान नहीं था. दैट वाज आल्सो वन रीजन. ठीक है. एंड इन फैक्ट, लाइक, एज ही वाज सजेस्टेड एंड ही थॉट ऑफ मेकिंग देम अलाइज, दैट इज आल्सो वन रीजन बिकॉज ऑफ व्हाट ही हैड बीन डूइंग इट. देयर वाज वन मोर पॉलिटिकल रीजन, that he wanted to create a balance in the court. So the way the Turanis, Iranis and the Sheikh Jadas had gradually become more powerful, and खासकर जो ये वो है Turanis, right? They had been mostly like, they always, if you'll read the nature of the Mughal state, we'll find that they always wanted to be treated as the allies or the partner of the Mughals, right? Mughals were believing in that hierarchy. Now they were never ready to accept them as the partner. Support उनको वो करते, patronize करते, but still, like, they were not ready to accept them as partner. So in order to make a balance, like, you know, they got the Rajputas and some high position have been given to them. That was also one, like, you know, a neat balancing element was also there. So apart from that, you know, that sometimes maybe the Akbar's parvaris or the, like, you know, the upbringing of Akbar was also one reason for his Rajput policy, because he was brought up in a Rajput family. So he had a better understanding and he never maintained any sort of religious rivalry with Hinduism or any, like, no other thing. So that's how you can write about it. Athar Ali is one historian that you should mention in this, as he had precisely studied the Mughal Rajput policy. Athar Ali, Athar. Athar Ali. Fine. Okay. Now next is the next question. This question was, like, you know, an intense question. Evaluate the impact of Mughal revenue administration on the agrarian structure of North India. To what extent did it bring continuity and change in the rural socio-economic fabric? Okay. Until and unless you have studied it properly, you won't be able to write it. So first of all, the impact of Mughal revenue administration. So start the answer briefly with some of the bigger changes brought by the Mughals in the revenue administration, right? And then second, you need to write about the changes in the agrarian structure. So you need to precisely write about the agrarian structure. So basically, you will find that the creation of class in the agrarian structure that comes because of, like, you know, Mughals. So there are various classes that you find in the rural society, such as the intermediaries, right? Jamindars precisely, right? So Jamindar is becoming a generic term under the Mughals only. उससे पहले Jamindar term का इतना इस्तेमाल नहीं होता था. So the intermediaries become a permanent class in the rural society. Second, like, further divisions such as Khud caste, Pai caste, right? Mujriyan, these are the various classes coming in the rural society. Apart from that, you can talk about the coming of a moneylender. Now, moneylenders started becoming a regular feature of the rural society. Why? Because Mughals were always expecting the revenue in cash. That is also one reason. Okay. Though Mughals tried a lot to control the exploitation of the peasantry, right, but yet, like, you know, they were not very successful. And that's how the condition of the peasantry mostly remained deprived. But then this condition of peasantry was very much depending on what? It was very much depending on the land holding. Those who had good land holding, like, you know, somehow they, like, you know, not only survived, they flourished. But those who had lesser land holding, they gradually became more poor. Right? That's also one important thing. The introduction of many commercial crops, that's also one important impact of it. Some people, some farmers went precisely for the commercial farming. Why? Because they were not capable of paying the land revenue. That's how, like, it was happening. Now, when it comes to continuity and the change in the rural socio-economic fabric, so I think that both the things are there. So at one hand, you will find the intermediaries and a class creation that was already there, like that continue. Okay, the things more or less remain same, but then at the same time, as I told you, that certain new classes got created, certain new classes took entry in the rural society. That's also one thing that could be noticed. Okay, so this is how like certain negative aspects are also there. So both changes and the continuity both can be noticed. Okay. Next is the Aurangzeb's religious policy was a reflection of the changed political realities of the Mughal Empire, precisely taken from Satish Chandra only. Okay. So you know about this question, right? So you know that about Aurangzeb's religious policy. And Aurangzeb's religious, there are two ideas. Nationalist scholars Jadunath Sarkar and all, like they believe that Aurangzeb was an orthodox fellow, that's why he got this kind of religious policy. Scholars like Satish Chandra and all, they always counter this argument by saying this, no, he had certain practical compulsions because of what? He had to take these kind of decisions. So you just need to write about those, the political realities, because of what he need to take it. Political realities kya kya hai? One is basically the financial crisis. After his incoronation, there was a perpetual famine. And in fact, it continued for 7 years. So a severe financial crisis he had been facing. That's also that's one thing. Okay, what next? We can talk about the Deccan expansion. That's also one political reality. Rise of the regional identities, right? So the Rajput rulers himself, principalities started challenging him. Multiple revolts against him, Jat, Satnami, Pathan and all, they have started revolting. That was also one reality. The court factions, right? The court factions have also started under him only, Akbar ke Aurangzeb ke period mein. Stick, right? So this is how he had multiple let's say compulsions, and that's the reason because of what. Acha, you need to write precisely more about the Rajputas. In fact, the kind of loyalties the Rajputas did so to Akbar, they did not show it to the Aurangzeb. And in fact, Jai Singh second and all, they have started continuously challenging. Sometimes they were with him, sometimes they had been rejecting his ideas or the instructions. So certain challenges started coming from their side. So these are the political realities under which ultimately he had been going for a very strict religious policy. That's it. Define the rise of the distinct provincial architectural style under the Mughal Empire in light of structural diversity, cultural interaction, and the nature of provincial power dynamics. Okay, this question is again, though it is from art and culture, but then it's a more tricky question. The rise of distinct provincial architecture under the Mughal Empire, that is not very important, in the light of structural diversity, cultural interaction, and the nature of provincial power dynamics. So basically, the regional powers started emerging in this period when the Mughals were slightly going down. So you can find that there were numbers of distinct cultural, provincial architecture was developing, such as in Bengal you can find a distinct architectural style, right? Deccan, then Rajasthan, then Punjab and Kashmir, Gujarat and Malwa. These are the various places: Bengal, Deccan, Rajasthan, Punjab and Kashmir, and Gujarat and Malwa. These are the various provincial regions. And in fact, every region remains slightly different from each other. And it was depending on what? Structural diversity. So Kashmir, undoubtedly the structural diversity. Kashmir is different from Gujarat and all these regions. Deccan is very different. So this was depending on this. Cultural interaction. So such as we'll talk about Deccan. So here you can find the Islamic interaction of the Islamic architectural style was very influential. On the other hand, when it comes to Rajasthan, Jammu and Kashmir, you'll find lesser impact of the Mughal architecture. So there are a couple of architectures we can find are greater impact of the Mughals. In couple of places you won't find it. And the nature of provincial power dynamics, undoubtedly that was also matter, right? Where exactly the rulers are more powerful, and according to their power, architectures are always the reflection of the power dynamics. Okay? So how is their architecture? That is very much depending on that what powers are being enjoyed by them. So such as the power, architecture in Bengal, you will find very glorious. Okay, it is always using the black marble, right, rather than the white marble. तो ये सब power dynamics है जिसकी वजह से इस्तेमाल होता था इसको. थोड़ा सा ये वाला इसमें जो है you could have definitely mentioned there were a couple of scholars. Percy Brown, one of the old scholars who has studied the Mughal and the provincial architecture. Then Catherine B. Asser, important scholar. Then Ebba Koch, E-B-B-A-C-O-C-H, K-O-C-H, Ebba Koch. Asar, A-S-H-E-R, Catherine B. Asar. Okay, fine. So let's move to the next question and the last question. Critically examine the political, military and administrative factors that led to the transformation of the Maratha characters in 18th century. How did these changes influence the rise and eventual decline of VA? So, okay, this question is again a tricky question. Understand this question. It is saying examine the political, military and administrative factors that led to the transformation of the Maratha characters in 18th century. Fine. So what transformation it is talking about? So the Marathas, right? Marathas in 17th century and Marathas in 18th century. There is a drastic difference between the two. So here, like, they talk about this Hindu Swaraj and then, like, guerrilla warfare and all these kind of things are there. Some social factors are also there, like, some, the way the Maharashtra Dharma and all these things are there. But then in 18th century, like, the character got drastically changed. And in fact, here you'll find that the various political, military and administrative factors. Okay, fine. So political is about the decline of the Mughals. Right. So that led to the rise of the decline of the Mughals, the coming of regional powers, the regular, like, wars or the conflict among the regional powers. So, you know about the condition of South, there were several regional powers, Deccan, not South, several regional powers. They had been, like, fighting continuously. Then the military. Now the Marathas are about, like, Marathas were having some solid military. Instead of guerrilla warfare, now they were relying on the proper armies. Okay? So that was a change. And then administrative. So in the time of Shivaji, you can find that there was a proper administrative structure, but the Marathas never paid attention to, like, in 18th century, they never paid attention to it, right? So basically, these are certain things because of what initially so they came to power. Okay? That was suiting, that was, like, quite convenient to them, and that's how they came to the power. But then I must tell you, all these reasons what I just, like, listed here, which is working or functioning for the rise of the Marathas, right? Ultimately, the same reasons ultimately become the reason for the decline of the Marathas, such as their polity, right? As I told you that they ignored polity. They had been controlling very lesser, lesser places. They never went for proper administrative structure in their regions, right? So no proper land revenue settlements, right? And all these things. Okay. Military, like Maratha military was never very organized. Okay. It was highly indisciplined. And in fact, like, more the feudal structure was there in Maratha politics. They were having mostly the loyalty towards the Maratha chiefs, Maratha Sardars, right, rather than the Peshwa. That was the problem. And administrative, I have already told you that they never went for this administrative structure. Acha, polity you need to write about. Acha, sorry, a very important point that I missed to tell you. When it comes to the polity, when the Sahu is coming back, at that point of time, the Maratha chiefs were already there. So the presence of Maratha chief was quite helpful because the Sahu was getting help from Scindia, Gaikwad, Bhosle and everybody. So somehow the Marathas were spread in a larger region and this was giving a push to the Maratha power. So initially, probably, like, the Maratha chiefs needed a Peshwa, a powerful, like, person. That's why they supported it. Later, this political structure of the Marathas became the primary reason for the decline of the Marathas because the conflict or the fractions among these Maratha chiefs, like, appeared, and that's how, like, the decline could be noticed. That is it, like, this question. That's how you're going to write about. So that's all about this paper. Okay. That's all about this paper. So paper was simple. Okay. Paper aisa, if you need to write only 5 questions, frankly speaking, it was not very tough. There were a couple of questions that were tricky. I honestly accepted. Just a Hindi wala question. Undoubtedly, we won't be having this much content. Or in ancient India, there are, like, 2 questions from early medieval India. They were very tricky. I won't, like, deny it. But ठीक है, बाकी questions doable थे, ये भी बात सही है. ऐसा नहीं था कि नहीं लिखा जा सकता था. So that is it. So 5 question तो लिख ही सकते थे. ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्या होता था? 5 question में एक question ऐसा हमारे combination में फंस जाता जो हमें लिखना भी पड़ता और मे बी हमारे पास information सही नहीं थी. वहाँ पे you need to make the decision very smartly कि whether you need to sacrifice your 15 marks or 20 marks. वो थोड़ा स्मार्टली सेलेक्ट करना होता है. ठीक है. सो टुमारो विल बी हैविंग द डिस्कशन ऑन पेपर 2. ठीक है. थैंक यू वेरी मच.